Haunted by the tragedy of her past, Rachel stares at the lifeless bodies of her companions while the words, "I'm sorry," echo through the darkness. Blood stains the ground as a dying friend's face fades away, leaving Rachel to grapple with a crushing weight of guilt. Tears stream down Rachel's face as she realizes the magnitude of her failure, her blue eyes filled with absolute despair. A shadowy figure looms over the fallen, raising a blade to deliver a final, mocking blow against a backdrop of violent crimson. In a vibrant memory of happier times, Rachel smiles alongside her friends and a black cat, unaware of the horror to come. A young man with green hair and a cheerful maid look back at Rachel with warmth, evoking the peaceful life she once took for granted. The vision shatters as Rachel is pierced through the chest, her face contorted in a silent scream of agony. Slumped over in the forest, Rachel's life force ebbs away as she is brutally executed by a cloaked figure. A dark hand reaches out to catch her falling spirit, mocking the life full of regrets she is about to leave behind. As her vision blurs into a narrow slit of light, a voice tells Rachel that it is still too early for her to sleep. Rachel plummets through a void of white light, her eyes wide with shock as the world around her deconstructs. Gasping for air, Rachel wonders if her salvation was merely a dream or something far more incomprehensible. She jolts awake in a cold sweat, her mind reeling from the vivid sensation of death that still clings to her soul. Clutching her sheets in terror, Rachel desperately tries to convince herself that the nightmare of her execution wasn't real. Her maid, Sarah, appears at her bedside with a tray of water, beaming with relief that her lady has finally awakened. Disoriented, Rachel stares at the reflection of her younger self in the water, struggling to process Sarah's physical presence. Sarah asks if Rachel's memory is hazy, noting that she has been unconscious for 3 days. Rachel learns she supposedly collapsed from a sudden fever, keeping her bedridden while the world moved on. Sarah laments that Rachel is missing her prestigious entrance ceremony because of her unexpected illness. When Rachel mentions the Torsova Magic Academy, she realizes the timeline has shifted back to her youth. Sarah expresses her disappointment at not seeing Rachel in her lovely new academy outfit. Rachel recalls that she was the top student 3 years ago, possessing the highest magical power of her class. She remembers standing proudly as the Crown Prince's fiancée, delivering the welcome speech on behalf of the freshmen. Watching Sarah open the curtains, Rachel finally accepts the impossible truth that she has returned to her 15-year-old self. She frantically checks her body, finding that the fatal wound that ended her previous life has completely vanished. Despite the lack of physical scars, the phantom pain and paralyzing fear of her death remain etched into her mind. Feeling her body grow heavy, Rachel wonders if this current world is the dream or if her entire future was a nightmare. She reflects on her younger self's naivety, remembering a time when she truly believed her future was full of hope. A doctor and a noblewoman gather around Rachel's bed, their faces grim as they assess her condition. The worried woman asks for an update, desperate to know if Rachel is actually recovering from her collapse. The doctor delivers a devastating diagnosis, revealing that Rachel's legendary magical power has completely dried up. Rachel's mother panics, demanding to know if her daughter will ever return to normal after losing her gifts. Closing her eyes in quiet resignation, Rachel realizes that the loss of her magic is the price she must pay. The doctor explains that while magic is the source of life, Rachel's once vast reservoir was like a thriving lake. He uses the metaphor of a parched landscape to illustrate that only a few drops of magic remain in her body. Despite the family's pleas, the doctor admits he has never seen such a total depletion and cannot offer a cure. Rachel lies in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling and accepting her current state as a form of divine punishment. She reflects on how she used her superior magic to hurt others and harm the saint in her previous life. Burdened by the weight of her sins, she wonders how she can possibly navigate this new beginning. A small, sad smile touches her lips as she realizes how fortunate she is to have a second chance at all. She feels a sense of relief that this time, she is the only one suffering while the people around her remain safe. Determined to change her fate, Rachel vows to live her life again without hurting the saint or anyone else. Elsewhere, young nobles Cyril and Lord Louis discuss the strange events unfolding at the estate. A student named Ernest approaches his peers, asking for a moment of their time to discuss a serious matter. The group discusses the news that Lady Rachel Marcel has finally recovered after her 3-day ordeal. During a tea party, the prince mentions a gift of cookies from the commoner children he recently helped. Rachel's past personality resurfaces in a memory, where she recoils in disgust at the thought of filthy, commoner food. She slams her hand on the table, berating the servants for allowing something touched by commoners to reach the prince. Rachel demands the cookies be discarded immediately, insisting their personal chef make a proper replacement. The prince looks away in discomfort, claiming he suddenly feels unwell after Rachel's harsh outburst. Crown Prince Louis gazes out with a look of cold disdain, reflecting on his fiancée Rachel Marcel, whose arrogance and obsession with her own magical power have alienated everyone around her. Prince Louis decides that despite the rumors of her recovery, he cannot avoid visiting the woman he considers shallow and surface-oriented. Rachel's cousin Ernest offers a sincere apology for the trouble his relative has caused, bowing deeply in a show of contrition. Standing firm in his duty, Louis orders his assistants Cyril and Ernest to prepare for an official visit to the Marcel Marquis family. The group moves through the palace corridors with a sense of heavy purpose, Cyril promising to accompany the prince on this unpleasant errand. In a flashback to the social circles, noblewomen whisper maliciously about Rachel, mocking the beautiful daughter of the Marquis for being discarded by the crown prince. The ladies laugh hysterically while feigning honesty, taking delight in the downfall of the young lady they claim lacked the cunning to survive high society. In the present, Rachel wakes up in a cold sweat, gasping for water as she reaches out with a trembling hand. A loud crash echoes through the room as Rachel accidentally shatters her water glass, causing her panicked maid to rush to her side. Her maid Sarah frantically checks for injuries, but a dazed Rachel insists she is fine despite her obvious physical weakness. Sarah gently urges her mistress not to strain herself and to rest while she cleans up the mess. Rachel asks about her mother's well-being and learns that her parents are currently resting together after the initial shock of her condition. Offering a warm and genuine smile, Sarah reassures Rachel that everyone will be healthy and well again very soon. Overwhelmed by the maid's kindness, Rachel can only manage a soft "thank you" as she is tucked back into bed. Rachel stares at the ceiling in silence, her mind racing with thoughts she has never entertained before. The young noblewoman's eyes wide with realization. She begins to see the world through a completely different lens. She reflects on the transformative power of a single word and how a simple act of gratitude can change everything. Watching Sarah clean the floor with a smile, Rachel is struck by the fact that such a small gesture could bring her comfort. A warmth spreads through her chest as she realizes what it truly feels like to receive a sincere smile from another person. In a moment of profound humility, Rachel wonders why she never realized that everyone possesses equal emotions regardless of their status or position. She laments her own foolishness, regretting that it took losing her former self to understand such a basic human truth. Looking out the window, she finally understands why the prince chose the saint over a woman as cold and hollow as she used to be. Gazing at the vast horizon, Rachel yearns for a chance to truly start over and live a life of meaning in this world. She vows that if she gets a second chance, her goal will be to make people smile rather than causing them pain. Clutching her chest, she wonders if it is even possible for someone like her to live such a selfless life. She prays for the strength to live a life defined by kindness rather than her past arrogance. Sarah returns to the bedside, snapping Rachel out of her deep internal monologue. The maid cheerfully explains that she has a message from the master and offers to fix Rachel's hair to make her presentable. Rachel's heart stops when Sarah reveals the shocking news that the crown prince will be visiting the manor shortly. Sarah assumes the prince is coming out of concern for his fiancée's health, while Rachel remains frozen in sheer disbelief. Realizing she has traveled 3 years back into the past, Rachel panics because she is still officially engaged to the man she thought she had escaped. The memory of Prince Louis and his loyal attendants sits heavy in her mind as she prepares to face her past head-on. The Marcel Marquis estate stands grand and imposing, unaware of the internal turmoil of its young mistress. Rachel stands before the massive doors of the drawing room, her breath hitching as she prepares to face her destiny. The camera focuses on the elegant shoes of the visiting party as they stride confidently through the marble halls. In a separate location, a mysterious girl screams in frustration, demanding to know why the events of the entrance ceremony are not happening as she planned. The girl looks absolutely bewildered, her eyes bulging as she realizes the narrative she expected is falling apart. Back at the manor, Prince Louis arrives with his aides Cyril and Ernest, looking every bit the cold and perfect royal. Marquis Marcel greets the royal party with a bow, thanking the prince for traveling all this way to see his daughter. Louis wastes no time with pleasantries, immediately demanding to know the true state of Rachel's condition. The Marquis looks down in sorrow, his face lined with the weight of the grim news he is about to deliver. The room falls into a deathly silence as the Marquis reveals the devastating truth. Rachel's legendary magic power has completely dried up. Cyril and Ernest are visibly shaken by the news, while Louis processes the fact that the situation is far worse than he imagined. The Marquis confirms that the diagnosis came from the royal palace's own Dr. Donald, leaving no room for error. Louis contemplates the strategic loss to the country, as Rachel was chosen specifically for her immense magical capacity which was said to rival entire nations. Despite his callous nature, Louis offers the Marquis an aid to help settle affairs, but the grieving father only begs the prince to see his daughter. The Marquis leads the way, hoping that the prince's presence will be the best medicine for the girl who has lost everything. As he approaches the door, Louis wonders if a woman as proud as Rachel can even survive a reality where her power is gone. The Marquis announces the prince's arrival while Louis prepares himself for a scene of hysterical screaming or visible despair. Prince Louis steps into the room, his eyes sharp and expectant, ready to face the broken remains of his former fiancée. Rachel sits alone in her room, a somber expression clouding her face as she reflects in the quiet stillness. Prince Elliot arrives with his attendants, his presence sharp and formal as he prepares to confront his fiancée. The scene shifts to the imposing curtains surrounding Rachel's bed, emphasizing her isolation from the royal world outside. Haunted by her past, Rachel questions why she was ever so desperately obsessed with the crown prince. She acknowledges Elliot's reputation as a fine man who works tirelessly for the nation, though her perspective has begun to shift. Recalling her former delusions, she remembers how his polite gestures convinced her she was truly loved. She realizes now that the gentle expression he once wore was nothing more than a mask of social etiquette. Rachel watches from the shadows of her memory as Elliot offers that same practiced smile to every girl in the crowd. Standing amidst the garden, the prince radiates charm while Rachel looks on, her heart sinking at the lack of exclusivity in his affection. Jealousy consumed her the moment the saint appeared, driving her toward a destructive path of envy. Distraught by her own transformation, she confesses to the disgusting reality of her past attempt to poison the saint. The heavy weight of her crimes led to a disastrous result, leaving her broken and regretful. Caught in a loop of what-ifs, Rachel admits she has spent countless moments drowning in the bitterness of her choices. While she used to meticulously dress up for the prince's visits, she finds she no longer has the desire to perform for him. As a servant announces his arrival, Rachel feels her long-held feelings of longing finally die away. With a calm, resolute gaze, Rachel looks directly at the prince and asks to annul their engagement. Elliot stands momentarily stunned by the sudden proposal, the air in the room turning cold and tense. Believing he must find her repulsive, she offers to break off the union from her side to spare them both. She silently wishes him happiness with his true love, ready to face whatever consequences follow her declaration. Weak and bedridden, she asks the prince to excuse her lack of strength as she remains under the covers. Elliot tries to reassure her that he won't stay long, claiming he only wanted to check on her condition. The prince dismisses his aides so he can speak with Rachel in private, leaving the two alone in the grand bedroom. Elliot mentions he heard of her situation from the Marquis, offering a patronizing sympathy for her current plight. Rachel cuts through his pity with a blunt no, refusing to play the part of the tragic victim. Looking surprisingly at peace, she tells him that she is actually glad everything has turned out this way. Elliot stares at her in silence, caught off guard by her uncharacteristic lack of desperation. The silence stretches between them as the prince struggles to process her newfound detachment. Rachel admits she was a flawed person who only cared about surface-level status despite her magical power. Looking at her hands, she laments that she never even tried to see what truly mattered beneath the royal finery. Elliot notes with a hint of suspicion how quickly she has accepted the loss of her former life. Rachel gazes into the distance, explaining that the loss of her magic made her realize the truth of her situation immediately. She struggles to find the words for her internal shift, while Elliot wonders if her mind has been affected as much as her magic. Rachel apologizes for her silence, but the prince tells her to speak only when she feels ready. She notes how he respects her enough not to command her to speak, even though his royal position allows it. She reflects on the subtle kindnesses from him that she was once too blinded by obsession to notice. Reaffirming her stance, she tells him there is no longer any reason for someone like her to remain his fiancée. She pleads for him to dissolve the engagement once and for all, hoping to be free of the royal burden. Elliot flashes a bright, genuine smile and promises to make it a habit to visit her often from now on. Rachel's eyes widen in absolute shock as the conversation takes a turn she never anticipated. He laments that they can't attend the same academy anymore but vows to keep her updated on all the news. Elliot confesses that he was just as guilty of only looking at the surface of their relationship. As Rachel stammers in confusion, the prince leans in and suggests they grow closer for real this time. He points out she spoke of their engagement in the past tense before firmly declaring he has no plans to let her go. Elliot departs with his documents in hand, leaving behind a bewildered Rachel and a confused assistant. A frustrated scream of, "Why?" echoes from the room as Rachel's plan for a clean break completely backfires. The prince's carriage rolls away from the estate, the wheels turning as he heads back to his royal duties. His aide comments on how rare it is to see the prince looking so genuinely pleased. Elliot doesn't deny it, his expression soft as he thinks back on their interaction. He chuckles to himself, admitting that delighted might be the right word for how he feels. He ponders what changed her so much, noting there was no deception in her words even as she gave him up. Staring at his hands, the prince muses that Rachel truly seems to want to break up, but he has no intention of letting go of someone so interesting. Watching her from a distance, he wonders how she will react the next time they meet. Beneath a crescent moon, his carriage travels through the night as he looks forward to their upcoming encounter. Sitting together on a garden bench, the prince suddenly asks Rachel how much she actually knows about the notorious Salim district. Rachel remains silent and contemplative, her expression unreadable as the conversation shifts to heavier topics. Reflecting on the time since His Highness first visited her, Rachel struggles to remember exactly what she said during that pivotal moment. Nearly 3 months have passed since then, and the prince smiles warmly while asking after her current physical condition. A brief silence hangs in the air as the memory of their past interactions lingers. Despite her initial plan to quietly cut ties and live a peaceful life away from him, the prince has kept his word by visiting her every few days without fail. Rachel admits she can stay awake longer now, but confesses that her appetite remains poor because everything feels too heavy. The prince rests his chin on his hand, thoughtfully promising to figure out a solution for her lack of appetite. Shifting the subject to social news, he mentions the recent ball and notes that Rachel would have normally debuted this year. Rachel admits her disappointment at missing her debut, though she secretly confesses she never actually liked social events anyway. The prince laments the missed opportunity to escort her in her debutante white gown, calling the situation a true shame. Flustered by his charm, Rachel assumes he must have found a dazzling beauty to admire at the ball instead. With a gentle smirk, the prince leans in and declares that there is no woman more charming than her. Overwhelmed by his embarrassingly sweet lines, Rachel becomes a blushing mess and shouts that he is actually the beautiful one. She realizes in frustration that they never used to have casual compliments or conversations like this in the past. Their history was devoid of this kind of easy back and forth, making this new dynamic all the more jarring for her. Rachel sulks as she realizes His Highness has a habit of completely ignoring the things she says. When she tries to bring up the engagement again, the prince swiftly cuts her off, insisting she shouldn't overexert herself. Rachel spirals into a panic, wondering if they will stay in this limbo until the saint finally appears at the academy. The prince watches her with a knowing, amused expression as she remains lost in her own frantic thoughts. Turning to her future, Rachel explains that since she already finished her third-year studies, she plans to hire a private tutor once she is well enough to sit up. The prince immediately offers to arrange a tutor for her himself, reminding her that she is his important fiancée. Seeing her face turn bright red again, he playfully asks if she has come down with a fever while she desperately denies any change in her condition. Rachel huffs and pouts, visually annoyed by his constant teasing and his ability to read her so easily. The prince laughs heartily, brushing his hair back in a rare moment of genuine, unshielded joy. Rachel stares at him in wide-eyed silence, struck by the raw emotion on his face. She realizes with a start that this is the first time she has ever seen him look so vulnerable and sincere. He apologizes for overindulging in the conversation, admitting there are very few people he can talk to without weighing pros and cons. He explains that in a country still scarred by the last war, one must always be careful because words can be easily twisted. When Rachel points out the war was 50 years ago, the prince counters that while the country has prospered, the reality is far more complex. He brings the conversation back to the Salim district, a place he knows represents the hidden darkness of their nation. A heavy shadow falls over the prince's face as he prepares to share a grim memory from his past. He describes the Salim district as a taboo place where those who lost everything in the war were gathered and then forgotten. He confesses that when he was 10, he recklessly slipped past his guards to visit the district with Cyril. The prince explains that he wanted to see the darkness that everyone else in the palace tried to pretend didn't exist. He stands firm in his belief that as a leader, he is the one who must know the truth more than anyone else. Recalling the horrific sights of the district, he tells Rachel that the experience was absolutely awful. The memory of the poverty and suffering he witnessed continues to haunt his thoughts. He remembers the hollow eyes of the children and the desperate atmosphere of a place left in the dark. In that moment of childhood powerlessness, he realized how little he could actually do to help. It was there that he swore to dedicate his life to the country, ensuring no single place is ever left in the dark again. Rachel is haunted by her own past reaction, remembering how she once dismissed his concerns about the district. In the memory, she cruelly told him there was no reason to trouble himself over people living in an entirely different world. Back in the present, the prince stands up abruptly, looking shaken by the sudden weight of the shared memory. Rachel begins to cry, thanking him for telling her the truth and apologizing for the heartless things she said in their past life. Realizing how much she must have hurt him then, she watches as the prince prepares to leave, apologizing for pushing her too hard. Rachel finally understands that as a child, he wasn't looking for a charming fiancé, but a true ally to help him fulfill his solemn vow. Haunted by memories of her past life, the girl laments that her specialized water magic could have prevented illness and saved countless lives if she had only worked with alchemists. Gazing at the dry earth and simple crops, she realizes that her vast powers were wasted on petty grievances instead of tackling the polluted water issues that plagued her people. Overwhelmed by a sudden sense of loss, she reflects on the magic she once possessed and the stark reality of having nothing left. A close-up of a face reveals a moment of intense, quiet agony as a single tear falls. Steeling her resolve despite the crushing weight of her regrets, she declares that even if she has nothing now, she will learn and gain everything back. Standing alone by her bed as the morning light streams through the window, she looks toward the future with a sharp, determined gaze. The narrative shifts to a dark memory where a woman in a formal gown runs through the shadows, haunted by echoing cries of "Why?" Falling to the floor in a grand hall, Marquis Marcel's daughter is confronted by two stern men who look down upon her with cold judgment. The prince demands a defense after accusing her of the ultimate betrayal, poisoning the saint and attacking her with forbidden water magic. Desperate and cornered, she screams that the saint deserved her fate for trying to steal the prince away, even as he coldly denies ever being hers to take. The prince's gaze turns icy as he asks if the very friends she trusted were the ones who brought the damning evidence of her crimes against the saint. Crumbling into a heap as the prince announces the annulment of their engagement with her parents' consent, she begs for him to wait while he walks away without a second glance. Reaching out with a trembling hand, she lets out a final, soul-crushing scream for His Highness that goes unanswered in the dark. From the shadows, the socialites who once surrounded her now hide behind their fans, whispering and snickering at her public downfall. Her former companions mock her fallen status, declaring her a nuisance and admitting they only stayed by her side because of her magic-born engagement. Towering over her with cruel satisfaction, the ladies sneer that she finally got exactly what she deserved. Gasping for air as the reality of her isolation sets in, she wonders what she was truly looking at during her time at the top. In a moment of self-loathing, she questions if her own face had become as ugly as the malice she harbored. Returning home in disgrace, she finds her father sitting in the shadows, his voice heavy with disappointment as he asks what she has done. Proclaiming that she has threatened the safety of the entire country, her father orders her to be sent to a remote monastery to reflect on her sins. A soft voice cuts through the darkness, addressing the fallen girl with a title she no longer feels she deserves. Her loyal maid Sarah kneels beside her, offering comfort and swearing that she will always be on her mistress's side. Refusing to let Sarah blame bad influences, the girl takes full responsibility for her choices while admitting she has completely messed up her life. While preparing for her exile, she recalls the loving saint's hollow words about how anyone can make mistakes, a kindness she never actually asked for. Looking at her reflection, she wonderingly asks Sarah if she could ever become like the saint who shines with such light, receiving an immediate, loyal affirmation. Embracing her maid, she smiles sadly, knowing in her heart that she can never be like the saint but cherishing Sarah's overwhelming sweetness. The peaceful moment is shattered by a sudden, violent intrusion as a struggle erupts and a piercing scream fills the room. Chaos unfolds as men restrain the girl while Sarah screams in terror, a blood-stained figure looming over the scene. In a blur of motion, a hand reaches out and a desperate command to stop rings out over a scene of impending violence. The girl wakes up with a start, realizing it was all a horrific nightmare as Sarah rushes to her side to comfort her thrashing form. Sarah gazes at her lady with deep concern, her face etched with worry for her mistress's mental state. Trembling from the vividness of the dream, the girl tries to steady her breathing and assures Sarah that she is fine now. Clinging to the blankets, she realizes the dream was a warning and vows that she will do whatever it takes to never lose Sarah or the others again. Sarah mentions a letter from His Highness stating that a new chef has been sent to help with the lady's lack of appetite while a suitable tutor is found. Though she still lacks an appetite, the girl decides to accept the meal out of respect for the prince's thoughtfulness and the chef's hard work. A nervous young man named Samuel Eminier enters, introducing himself as the chef sent by His Highness to prepare something easy for her to eat. He presents a steaming bowl of food, inviting her to enjoy the special dish he has prepared for her recovery. Looking at the white, gooey substance with skepticism, she hesitates, wondering if the strange dish is even meant to be food. She takes a tentative spoonful, the steam rising as she prepares for the first taste of this unfamiliar meal. To her immense surprise, the flavors bloom on her tongue, prompting her to exclaim that the dish is actually delicious. Samuel explains that the dish is called porridge, a common meal from the East that he thought would be gentle on her stomach. She remarks that while she knew of rice as commoner food, she had only ever seen it fried or served in soups. The chef explains he added extra water and used simple seasonings so she could enjoy the nutrition without being overwhelmed by strong flavors. Samuel promises to gradually introduce gentle vegetable stews, fish, and eggs as her portion size increases and her strength returns. He beams with a kind smile, encouraging her that they will help her body get used to eating again until she can enjoy full meals like before. Moved to tears by his genuine care, she realizes how much thought and effort he put into creating something just for her. She thanks Samuel deeply, feeling a spark of genuine happiness she never knew a simple meal could provide. Samuel softly notes that delicious food alone can give a person the strength they need to keep living on. The girl tells the chef she is looking forward to his cooking from now on, prompting a polite bow as he takes his leave. Sarah and Samuel share a final, satisfied look as they walk away, proud that their efforts have finally brought a smile back to their lady's face. Rachel reflects on her changing perspective, realizing how much her once small world is expanding now that she has met Samuel. Determined to show her gratitude, she resolves to find a proper way to thank the prince for his kindness. The prince enters her room and notes with a surprised smile how much livelier she has become in such a short duration. Rachel apologizes profusely for being so absorbed in her book that she failed to notice his unannounced arrival. Leaning in close to inspect her, the prince expresses his genuine relief that her complexion has significantly improved. She graciously thanks him for introducing her to the chef, which helped her discover the true depth and importance of cooking. Her heart races at his sudden proximity, and she internally begs him to be more aware of how his beautiful appearance affects others. Rachel excitedly explains how seasonings and cooking methods can completely transform the flavor of the same ingredients. The prince agrees, mentioning that even commoners' eateries across the country offer a vast variety of regional flavors. Shocked and envious that a royal has visited commoner diners, Rachel learns he used to think she disliked interacting with ordinary people. She admits she was completely wrong about commoners, now believing they might have even more creative ways of cooking than nobles. Rachel sighs as she looks at the delicious dishes in her book, wishing she could try them even though Samuel doesn't quite approve yet. While she considers asking her maid Sarah to buy treats secretly, the prince watches her and marvels at how much she has changed. Looking at her with a soft, knowing gaze, he simply confirms the transformation he sees in her. The prince sits by her bedside, finding himself strangely at peace in the quiet space they now share. Later, a companion asks the prince why he is brooding and why he seems unable to focus on his work. The prince looks away, momentarily startled by the suggestion that he is distracted or brooding. He begins to voice a concern, though he worries his aide Cyril might not be the best person to ask. Silence falls as the prince pauses his writing, lost in thought at his desk. He finally confesses that he is wondering what kind of present would truly make Rachel happy. Cyril dismissively suggests that anything should be fine since the prince has always given her flowers or accessories. The prince realizes that while those gifts worked in the past, Cyril is ultimately being no help at all. He recalls his routine of sending bouquets with proper meanings and trendy accessories that never caused any trouble. He concludes that the current Rachel is different and won't be moved by the same superficial things as before. Haunted by the radiant smile Samuel drew out of her, the prince desperately wants to know what he can do to earn that same look for himself. He tells Cyril he doesn't want to hear advice from someone who clearly doesn't understand the complexities of a woman's heart. The scene shifts to the bright exterior of the estate on a clear day. Rachel stares in confusion as the prince and Cyril approach her with a strange, wheeled chair. The prince explains that he learned of these wheelchairs from a neighboring country and had one custom crafted for her. He tells her he wanted a way for her to stroll through the garden without becoming physically exhausted. To ensure her safety, he even sat in the durable chair himself to test it before bringing it to her. Overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness, Rachel thanks him and expresses her desire to go outside to the garden immediately. To everyone's surprise, the prince announces that he will be the one to carry Rachel to the chair himself. He lifts her into his arms as she lets out a startled gasp at the sudden physical contact. Rachel blushes and worries she might be heavy, but the prince simply chuckles and tells her she is light as a feather. As he carries her, she is once again struck by his overwhelming beauty, finding it almost harmful to her eyes. Once she is settled in the chair, she tells the prince the seat feels so wonderful that she could stay there forever. Wearing a large sun hat, Rachel looks out at the world from her new perspective as the prince prepares to push the chair. She realizes with a start how long it has been since she last went outside, while the prince tells the staff to wait indoors. The camera focuses on the prince's determined eyes as he prepares to show her the world beyond her room. Petals drift through the air as the journey into the estate's grounds begins. The garden is in full bloom, welcoming her with a shower of falling flowers. Rachel looks up in awe as the prince pushes her deeper into the sunlit scenery. Gazing at the birds and fountains, she is moved to tears by how beautiful and bright the world has been all along. She turns to him with a heart-melting smile, truly thanking him for such a wonderful and meaningful gift. The prince looks down at her, his expression softening as he takes in the joy he has provided her. He agrees that the sight is dazzling, addressing her with a newfound warmth. He informs her that he must soon leave for an allied nation, but has arranged a tutor and asks her to write if she needs anything. Rachel promises to wait for his return, and the prince vows to come see her again so they can talk just like this. The prince and Cyril depart through the large doors, leaving Rachel with a renewed sense of hope and a much wider world. Rachel stares thoughtfully at her maid, acknowledging the presence of His Highness, while reflecting on the weight of her current situation. Trapped in a bittersweet memory of an embrace, Rachel realizes that within a year, the spirit summoning ceremony will change everything by bringing the prince and the saint together. Looking away in her wheelchair, she resolves to finalize the annulment of their engagement before the destined meeting occurs. A single droplet ripples in the darkness as Rachel mourns her lost right to long for the prince. Though her new wheelchair has expanded her range of movement, the newfound freedom feels hollow without him by her side. Staring at her own reflection in a teacup, Rachel notes with a heavy heart that His Highness hasn't appeared for weeks, likely preoccupied with his official duties. Her brother Louis tries to comfort her by promising to handle the engagement annulment, even though negotiations with His Majesty are currently at a standstill. Rachel questions her worthiness, thinking that with her frail body, she could never truly fulfill the duties of a crown princess. The weight of her physical and emotional limitations reflects in her somber expression. Reflecting on the prince's perfection, Rachel admits that she previously only saw his handsome face, magical power, and immense intelligence. She envisions the merciful saint as the only rightful person to stand beside him, knowing the future dictates he must eventually go to her. Tears stream down Rachel's face as she confronts the painful reality of her unrequited feelings. Slumped in her wheelchair, she struggles with the agony of knowing a future she cannot change. Desperate to stop the overflowing emotions, Rachel wishes she could simply stop thinking and find a way to seal her heart away. Her maid interrupts her spiraling thoughts, announcing that it is time to return to her room for her lesson with Mrs. Blewett. Mrs. Blewett, a former assistant director of the Royal Institute of Magic, arrives to begin Rachel's tutoring, praising her for her well-thought-out assignments. The lesson shifts to the country's relationship with spirits, as Rachel thanks her tutor for providing such helpful and easy-to-understand study materials. Mrs. Blewett explains the mechanics of a spirit summoning ritual, noting that spirits normally live in groups based on their attributes. Rachel recalls her own past ritual where she summoned a mid-tier water spirit that, while unable to speak, always lent her its strength through their magical connection. Guilt consumes her as she remembers how she once misused that spirit's power to hurt the saint. Now devoid of magic, Rachel laments that she can no longer even meet the spirit to offer an apology for her past actions. She correctly identifies the Spirit King as the great exception to the normal rules of summoning. Mrs. Blewett elaborates that while the Spirit King of Light rarely appears, he sometimes bestows blessings upon souls he finds worthy, creating the figure known as the Saint. The history of the Saint is shrouded in secrecy, with the last recorded appearance of the Spirit King occurring 30 years ago. Because of human greed, the Saint is treated as a symbol of the Spirit's protection over the country to prevent dependency on such immense power. Rachel begins to question if the saint is truly just a symbolic figure or if there is a deeper hidden truth. She recalls her academy days where they were taught that a blessing is merely a protective power given to a favored individual. The public worships the saint because her existence serves as proof that the spirits are still watching over their nation. A seed of doubt grows in Rachel's mind as she wonders if the lessons she was taught are actually true. She ponders the linguistic difference between a contract, where spirits lend power, and a blessing bestowed by the Spirit King. When Rachel asks about the true nature of the saint's power, Mrs. Blewett admits that such knowledge is restricted to the royal family and the saint herself. Mrs. Blewett reassures her that one cannot use a power they don't understand, noting that the prince trusts Rachel not to misuse this information. A sudden, sharp pain strikes Rachel's head as she struggles to focus on the lesson regarding spirit-dwelling places. Her vision blurs and darkens as the physical toll of her thoughts becomes too much to bear. In a dreamlike haze, Rachel hears a mysterious voice promising that they will meet again very soon. An unknown hand reaches out to touch her forehead while she lies unconscious and feverish. A man with long hair gazes down at her with a somber expression, whispering for her to rest well. The scene shifts to the aftermath of her collapse, with voices suggesting that too much of a burden was placed on her too quickly. Rachel wakes up after being bedridden for a week, thanking her maid Sarah for taking care of her during what was dismissed as a simple cold. Sarah reveals that the prince visited Rachel constantly while she was sick, even bringing fresh flowers for her again today. To Rachel's surprise, the maid mentions that the prince stayed by her side faithfully until she fell asleep each night. Sarah adds that a mysterious magician accompanied His Highness during his visits to the sickroom. The magician is described as an androgynous beauty with long silver hair, causing Rachel to realize his true identity. Rachel identifies the man as Theodore Camus, the brilliant heir of Marquis Camus and a magician whose talent reportedly surpasses even his legendary father. Despite their lack of interaction in her past life, she knows Theodore is a close childhood friend of the prince despite their age gap. Rachel wonders why such a high-ranking mage would bother visiting her, noticing that the prince himself seemed exhausted during these visits. She feels a pang of guilt envisioning the prince with dark circles under his eyes, clearly worn out from his various responsibilities. The maid emphasizes how worried the prince was, mentioning that he was so flustered he made a rare mistake with his appearance. In a moment of uncharacteristic disarray, the prince had arrived with his shirt buttoned entirely wrong. The two women share a light-hearted moment of disbelief, finding it impossible to imagine the usually perfect prince being so genuinely rattled. Rachel and her maid Sarah share a quiet laugh over the surprisingly unrefined behavior of the perfect crown prince. Clutching her face in disbelief, Rachel continues to reel from the shock that the seemingly flawless prince could act in such a way. The moment is interrupted as Rachel's father suddenly slides the door open with a cheerful smile to announce his presence. Rachel immediately scolds her father for barging into her room without waiting for a response, prompting a sheepish apology from him. Taking a moment to recover, Rachel reflects on the report that the Crown Prince and Lord Theodore had recently come to visit her. Propping his chin in thought, her father confirms the report and prepares to discuss the details of their arrival. He explains that his sudden intrusion was fueled by a father's simple, frantic desire to see his daughter the moment he heard she was feeling better. They discuss how Lord Theodore is likely assisting the prince with research, as the two have been spending a significant amount of time together lately. While her father mentions that the king has forbidden him from speaking too much about the medical nature of their visit, Rachel resolves to write a thank-you letter to Theodore. Rachel bids her father farewell, reminding him to look after his own health as he prepares to return to the royal castle. Her father warmly reciprocates the sentiment, urging Rachel not to push herself while she is still in the middle of her recovery. He gives a final, gentle wave as he exits the room, leaving his daughter to her own thoughts. Overwhelmed by the kindness of her family, Rachel feels a profound sense of gratitude for being born to such wonderful parents. Determined never to cause her parents sorrow again, she asks her maid Sarah to prepare paper and a pen so she can begin her correspondence. Sitting up in bed, Rachel stares at the blank page, finding it unexpectedly difficult to draft a letter to Lord Theodore compared to the prince. She agonizes over the contents of the letter, wondering why she is struggling so much to find the right words for a man she has already contacted once. Rachel admits to her maid that while her letters to the prince are full of actual conversation, her previous message to Theodore was nothing but empty formalities. She is stunned to find that Theodore sent a reply expressing his wish to visit her again, a development she never anticipated. The narrative shifts to the actual meeting, where Rachel finds herself face-to-face with the man who had been occupying her thoughts. Lord Theodore greets Lady Rachel with a knowing smile, noting that it has been quite a while since their last encounter. During their tea, Theodore casually mentions that Rachel appears to have slept well since their last meeting, much to her confusion. He playfully confesses that he used a sleep spell on her because she looked like she was having a difficult time resting. Rachel realizes that the sudden ease she felt that day was his doing and thanks him for going out of his way to help her. She is internally scandalized, however, when she hears Theodore refer to the crown prince by his first name, Louis, without any formal title. Theodore laughs off her concern, explaining that they keep things equal in private and that he left Louis buried under a pile of paperwork. Sensing her tension, he tells her not to look so worried and admits he only speaks so casually when others, like Rachel, aren't around. With a relaxed air, he leans back and tells her that his intuition says she is going to be just fine. Rachel is taken aback by his reliance on something as vague as intuition, while Theodore remains perfectly confident in his assessment. He warns her that being constantly serious and living only in her head will eventually wear her out. Theodore stares intensely at her, claiming that while she hides it well, he can see the constantly tense aura of someone carrying a heavy burden. He encourages Rachel to ease up and live more freely, noting that there is nothing they can do about the things they have already gained or lost. With a charming, direct smile, he asks her if it wouldn't be better to simply live with a smile on her face. Rachel is struck by his words, knowing that Theodore shouldn't have any knowledge of her past or the things that have happened to her. She reflects on the weight of her secret actions, realizing that the truth of what she has done is something he couldn't possibly know. She wonders how he can say such profound things so lightly while sitting across from her at the tea table. Rachel contemplates that perhaps it is precisely because he doesn't know her past that he is able to see something in her that she cannot. When Theodore calls her special, she assumes it is because of her status as the prince's fiancée, but he quickly dismisses the idea. The conversation takes a bizarre turn when Theodore suddenly points to her lap and asks about the cat sitting there. Rachel is completely bewildered as Theodore explains she can't see the black cat because she lacks magic power, suggesting she name it to make it visible. Frustrated and confused by the sudden change in topic, Rachel tries to wrap her head around the idea of an invisible black cat. She tentatively suggests the name Kuro, wondering if such a simple name could actually have an effect. Theodore bursts into laughter at the literal name just as a black spirit cat suddenly manifests on Rachel's lap, much to her shock. Rachel panics as she realizes a cat has appeared out of thin air, wondering exactly when it managed to climb onto her. Theodore explains that the spirit cat has actually been by her side peeking at her face ever since his last visit. He clarifies the nature of spirits, noting that they are usually invisible until a contract is formed and a name is given. Staring at the small creature, Rachel wonders how long this little spirit has been lingering near her without her knowledge. She quickly catches a contradiction and demands to know why Theodore was able to see the cat before it was ever named. Theodore reacts with casual amusement, acting as though the answer to her question should have been obvious all along. He reveals that he possesses the rare ability to see spirits, people's auras, and other supernatural phenomena directly. Rachel is left stunned by the revelation that he can see spirits without a contract, a feat that is considered impossible for normal people. Theodore explains that his ability to see spirits likely stems from inheriting the blood of the previous saint, who was famously blessed by the Spirit King. He wonders aloud if this rare power was a gift passed down through his lineage. Rachel is stunned to realize that in 3 centuries, only 2 royals have ever manifested such power, noting that the saint's line merged with the royal family and later the Camus Marquis family. Overwhelmed by Theodore's humility, Rachel reflects on her own past arrogance when she boasted about her magic levels and contracted spirit. A flashback shows the former Rachel parading her contracted spirit around with a shallow sense of pride. She cringes at her past behavior while Theodore clarifies that uncontracted spirits usually only appear as blurry outlines. Theodore observes that he has never seen a spirit grow so attached before a contract, specifically identifying the creature as a low-rank spirit of darkness. He notes that spirits of darkness were previously only theoretical, as their existence had never been officially confirmed until now. Rachel is visibly shaken by the revelation of the dark spirit, but Theodore remains cheerful, admitting it was his first time seeing one as well. Looking at the black cat spirit, Kuro, Rachel wonders why such a rare creature chose her when she is not its official contractor. The scene shifts briefly as the weight of the discovery settles between them. Theodore points out that Rachel is actually quite lucky because she can now borrow Kuro's magic to supplement her own. He explains that while her own magic is gone, she can use herself as a vessel for Kuro's power. Though she won't be able to perform complex or physical spells, this connection should restore a tenth of her magic and end her bedridden life. Theodore looks at her kindly and asks if this isn't a wonderful turn of events. Rachel repeats the word, great, to herself, her expression filled with doubt and hesitation. She struggles with the convenience of this miracle, feeling that someone like her doesn't deserve such a sudden blessing. Despondent, Rachel tells Theodore that she is unworthy of being chosen by Kuro, questioning why this is happening to her. Theodore gently reminds her that regardless of her past, the only fact that matters is that Kuro chose her. A quiet moment passes as Rachel processes his words of acceptance. Rachel stares in silence, her eyes reflecting a deep inner conflict. She admits to herself that she believed losing her magic was a rightful punishment for her previous sins. She realizes she had convinced herself that the loss was sufficient atonement and simply left it at that. Regret washes over her as she recognizes how selfish it was to almost reject Kuro after the spirit had specifically chosen her. Rachel clutches her head in a moment of intense emotional realization. Recovering her composure, she tells Lord Theodore that she clearly still has a great deal of personal reflection to do. Theodore smiles warmly at her growth, agreeing that her journey of self-reflection seems to be continuing. Rachel thanks him sincerely as Theodore expresses his hope that she and the little black cat will soon become close. Preparing to depart, Theodore promises to return and continue helping her until she can manage her magic for daily life. He insists she stay seated since she likely still cannot move her body as she wishes. Rachel watches him leave, looking surprised by his continued kindness. She remains on the sofa, clutching her dress as she reflects on the encounter. Determined to build a bond with her new companion, Rachel decides that her first priority is to prepare some toys for Kuro. 10 days later, a much happier Rachel plays with Kuro in the garden using a cat teaser. Kuro leaps and plays energetically, fully engaged with the handmade toy. Watching from a distance, His Highness laughs and notes that someone is clearly having a lot of fun. Startled, Rachel greets the prince, who is pleased to see her enjoying the company of animals and the toy he provided. Rachel blushes and hides her face, worried that she has shown him something terribly embarrassing while playing so freely. The prince teases her for forgetting he was there but admits he is glad to have seen the real her. Rachel credits Theodore's wonderful guidance for her recovery, while the prince observes that she truly does look like she is feeling better. A flashback shows Theodore patiently teaching Rachel to visualize the flow of magic from her toes to the top of her head. Rachel excitedly shares that his perfect matching of his teaching to her needs allowed her to walk all the way to the garden. The prince watches her with a soft, slightly flushed expression as she speaks with newfound energy. She asks if she may borrow Kuro's power again, calling the spirit to come to her. Holding the cat teaser, the prince agrees that Kuro is adorable, while Rachel watches them with a quiet smile. He looks at Rachel and softly expresses his wish that the spirit brings many good things to her personally. Rachel is momentarily confused, asking if he meant the country rather than just her. The prince laughs at her reaction, realizing she has finally figured out his true nature, while Rachel frets over her potentially rude comment. The sun shines brightly over the estate as the atmosphere between them grows light and warm. He confesses that while he is curious about the dark spirit's effect on the country, he simply loves researching things he doesn't yet know. Gazing toward the window, the young man confesses that despite everything he once deemed important, he has found something that matters even more now. Standing tall in his military regalia, the prince addresses Lady Rachel directly, his gaze fixed on her as she listens intently. Overwhelmed by emotion, he admits that thinking of Rachel and spending time by her side has become the most precious part of his life. Closing the distance with a gentle smile, he notices the subtle changes in her and asks if there is something she finally wants to tell him. At the dinner table, Rachel sits in stunned silence as the weight of the moment hangs heavy over their meal. While the family enjoys a divine pie made by Samuel and the mother, the atmosphere is lightened by praise for the gentle flavor. Rachel's mother is moved to tears of joy at the sight of her daughter sharing a meal with them again, prompted by her husband to stay composed at the table. Discussion turns to Viscount Phryne, who has been visiting daily to help Rachel adjust to the flow of Kuros magic. The father reveals he has reported the discovery of the dark spirit to His Majesty, who has decided to keep the matter private for the time being. They speculate that the king is waiting for the Holy Church's judgment before making any public announcement regarding the spirit. The narrative shifts to the looming silhouette of the Holy Church, the nation-state religion that reveres the Spirit King of Light. Rachel looks down thoughtfully, having already anticipated that such a complicated political situation would arise. Historical context is provided regarding the church's founding by a saint and the tradition of taking light-blessed individuals into custody. Because the church has deep ties to spirits, the unprecedented discovery of a dark spirit is a monumental event that threatens the status quo. The conversation shifts to Rachel's engagement, noting that His Majesty intends to leave the final decision in the prince's hands. To avoid a conflict between church and state, the king chooses to respect the massive influence the religious institution holds over the people. Rachel realizes that the silence regarding her annulment was due to the king considering the prince's feelings, though the royal family promises to find her a new match if it proceeds. Her father notes that while she suspected as much, the existence of the dark spirit has fundamentally changed the political landscape. He explains that because dark spirits are poorly understood, sometimes seen as shadows and other times as opposites to light, the king is paralyzed regarding the engagement. The enigmatic black cat spirit, Kuro, sits silently as the family contemplates whether its presence will ultimately benefit or harm the country. Resolved to never go down the wrong path again, Rachel finds the inner strength to stand and walk on her own. Reflecting on her past loss of magic, she regrets not using her power for the people who truly mattered to her. Determined to grow, she expresses a burning desire to step out of her narrow world and see what lies beyond. Her mother smiles warmly and offers a suggestion for them to take a new step together. Rachel reminisces about the precious time she has spent with the prince, cherishing the long history they share. She concludes with a heavy heart that if she truly wants the prince to lead the country happily, she must be the one to step away. Turning away from the prince in a dramatic confrontation, Rachel announces her firm intention to leave the capital and return to her family's territory. She vows to eventually free the prince from the chains of their engagement, seeking a future where he is no longer bound to her. In a peaceful outdoor scene, the maid Sarah is called out to while she carries a basket through the estate. Sarah informs Rachel that Lord Theodore's magic instruction has finished for the day, noting the progress being made. The maid expresses her genuine happiness at seeing Rachel's complexion and health improve day by day. After finishing the laundry, Sarah is invited by Rachel to see something special she discovered during her walk. The sun shines brightly over the conservatory as the two women walk together through the lush estate grounds. Rachel excitedly describes finding an absolutely adorable flower during her short stroll after her lesson. While Sarah offers to ask the gardener about the species, Rachel decides she wants to try looking it up herself first. Rachel's face is filled with a serene, contemplative expression as she gazes at the natural beauty surrounding her. She reflects on how the world has seemed more beautiful ever since the prince took her to the garden. Even the smallest blooming flowers now appear strong and pretty to her, though she realizes the world was likely always this way. Sarah notices Rachel's dazed expression and calls out to her with concern. Rachel clarifies that she is simply happy to walk again and share these sights with her loyal friend. Sarah thanks Rachel for the lovely moment, wishing for her mistress's joy to continue far into the future. A delicate illustration of flowers represents the simple, pure happiness found in Sarah's devoted service. During magic instruction, Rachel feels pathetic because Kuro avoids her and only responds to Lord Theodore, who encourages her by saying failure is part of growth. Lord Theodore wraps up the lesson as the prince arrives, and Kuro immediately leaps affectionately into Theodore's arms. The prince sits beside Rachel, expressing relief at her recovery while she admits she still struggles to master magic control. His Highness confesses he was terrified when Rachel collapsed with fever, nearly reaching out to touch her before pulling back in embarrassment. As a warm breeze flows between them, the prince promises to bring a toy for Kuro next time, leaving Rachel with a lingering sense of longing. Original author Aoi writes a heartfelt afterword, praising Sakamoto-bin-sensei's beautiful manga adaptation and rich character expressions. A stunning full-page illustration shows Rachel looking up toward the sky with a hopeful and bright expression. In a light-hearted bonus panel, the prince jokes that because of magical influence, Rachel has actually transformed into a cat. In the hallway, Theodore's companion notes that the glossy black cat nearby is just as adorable as he is, leaving the prince stunned by the comparison. Transformed by a mysterious magical influence, Rochelle looks on as Theodore wonders where the real Lady Rachel could have gone. Kuro the cat remains inseparable from Theodore, leading others to realize the depth of their bond as they plan to find the missing lady within the hour. A vibrant illustration captures the essence of the characters, showcasing the heroine's striking blue eyes and the mysterious black cat that follows her. The scene shifts to the golden-haired Prince Theodore, who extends a hand with a serious and contemplative gaze. Preparing to leave the royal capital, Theodore reflects on his duties and the necessity of returning to his own territory. Deep in thought, the prince stares intensely at a small object in his hand while the atmosphere around him grows heavy and dark. Memories of the heroine and her feline companion resurface, highlighting the lingering connection between them despite the distance. Theodore stands tall in his regal attire, his expression hardened as he prepares for the arrival of his associate, Cyril. Cyril arrives at the chambers to announce Lord Theodore's presence, prompting the prince to grant him entry with a weary command. Noticing Theodore's unusual expression, Cyril cheekily asks if his distress is caused by Lady Rachel. Theodore sulks and demands silence as Cyril relentlessly teases him about being lovesick and childish. Cyril continues to needle the prince, asking if he is suffering because this is his very first experience with love. The weight of the words, first love, hangs in the air, forcing Theodore to confront his true feelings. Theodore reminisces about a vivid day in the garden, finally admitting to himself that this feeling is indeed his first love. Since that day, Rachel's face flashes through his mind at random times, fueling an intense desire to see her again. Theodore contemplates breaking off their engagement as she requested, believing it might be the only way for her to live in peace. He acknowledges that being the crown prince's fiancé must be a heavy burden for her to carry right now. Regret washes over him as he realizes that before she fell ill, he never even tried to look at her properly. Despite knowing he should let her go to someone more worthy who cherished her from the start, he finds himself unable to choose that path. In a moment of painful clarity, Theodore realizes that he might be the one hurting her the most in the end. Cyril shifts the conversation back to business, asking if the prince still intends to investigate the cause of the mana depletion. With a resolute look, Theodore confirms that he will absolutely continue the investigation. Cyril agrees to help as always, suggesting they should prioritize looking into the mystery of the dark spirit first. They discuss Rachel's return to her territory and how the church's announcement regarding the dark spirit will affect her life. Theodore agrees that leaving the capital is a good choice for her safety, though the realization clearly pains him. Seeing the prince's struggle, Cyril advises him to send her off with a smile to ease her departure. Frustrated by the truth of Cyril's words, Theodore shouts that he already knows what he must do. Cyril points out that Theodore is simply terrified of the idea of Rachel leaving him forever. Theodore remains lost in his internal conflict, desperately questioning what his next move should be. Cyril instructs him to keep searching for the cause of her mana depletion while maintaining a supportive smile as she leaves. He emphasizes that Theodore must be the first one ready to rush to her side the moment she finds herself in trouble. Touched by the advice, Theodore calls Cyril a good guy, while Cyril jokes that he'd get married if more guys were like himself. Taking action, Theodore decides to assign one of his own skilled people to Rachel's secret guard detail. He worries that if she ends up in danger without his knowledge, he won't be able to protect her in time. Theodore points directly at Cyril, deciding that he is the most skilled and loyal person for the job, much to Cyril's annoyance. Rachel stands before a mirror, looking uncertain in her new attire as she prepares for her secret outing. Sarah reassures Rachel that she looks like a merchant's daughter, even if she still carries a hint of noble elegance. A letter addressed to Lady Rachel appears, setting the stage for her departure to the territory. The correspondence emphasizes the importance of her journey before she heads out to the countryside. Sarah's note suggests sneaking off to a recommended eatery once the escort arrives to pick her up. A simple transitional frame marks the passage of time as the characters prepare for the next phase of their plan. Rachel and Sarah appear side by side, their nervous energy evident as they prepare for the prince's arrival. Rachel notices something wrong and asks if the spirit companion wants to join them on their outing. The atmosphere remains tense and quiet as they wait for the final signals to move. Rachel decides it is better for the spirit to stay behind, fearing that someone in town might be able to see it. A maid enters the room to announce that His Highness the Crown Prince has officially arrived. Theodore appears in a simple vest and shirt, beaming at Rachel and calling out her name with genuine joy. Caught completely off guard by his sudden and informal appearance, Rachel can only stare in shock. Theodore showers her with praise, telling her she looks adorable and that every guy in town would propose to her. Gazing intently, the prince reveals his disguise, explaining that his current hair color is actually a wig. He laughs off the disbelief of his companion, Rachel, clarifying that he poses as a blacksmith's apprentice to blend into the town. Explaining his motivation, he notes that being recognized as royalty would immediately cause people to keep their distance. He smiles broadly while carrying goods through a crowd, emphasizing that one must truly blend in to understand how commoners live. Rachel reflects on his past mentions of going incognito, finally seeing the reality of his secret excursions into town. She blushes furiously, comparing their outing to a date between a blacksmith's apprentice and a merchant's daughter. To her shock and embarrassment, the prince brightly confirms that he indeed considers this a date. Offering his hand with a gentle, romantic gaze, he signals that it is time for them to depart. Rachel hesitates for a moment before slowly reaching out to accept his offered hand. Their hands meet and clasp firmly, solidifying their pact for the day's journey. The two share a tender look, blushing as they officially begin their undercover outing together. Hand in hand, they walk away through a scenic, tree-lined path toward their destination. Seated inside a modest carriage, the prince apologizes for the lack of comfort required to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Rachel expresses her gratitude, her mind racing with curiosity about their current location. Bubbling with excitement, she wonders if the exotic foods she has only read about in books actually exist in the city. The prince watches her with an amused smile before reminding her of a crucial rule for their disguise. He leans in and strictly instructs her that she cannot address him as Your Highness while they are in town. Rachel panics at the realization, stammering as she tries to process the social difficulty of such a request. She worries that using his royal title would instantly undo all his hard work and make them stand out to the public. The prince encourages her to think of a casual alternative, leaving her struggling to find a way to drop his honorifics. Looking down in the carriage, she feels the weight of the impossible task of treating royalty as an equal. He teases her to practice saying his name, while she cries out in frustration that it is simply impossible. She attempts to stutter out the beginning of his name, but her voice fails her under the pressure. Blushing deeply and nearly in tears, she struggles to force the casual name past her lips. Finally, she manages to whisper, Louis, while huddled in embarrassment on the carriage seat. The prince lets out a soft, satisfied chuckle at her successful, albeit difficult, attempt. Rachel immediately protests that dropping honorifics for a prince is far too much for her to handle. She spirals into a panic, imagining the knights protecting them would be confused and the entire town would fall into chaos. Sensing her genuine distress, the prince kindly tells her they can take it slow and apologizes for pushing her. He suggests she use Luke instead, explaining that it is the alias he always uses when visiting the town. Realizing he was just teasing her to hear her say his real name, Rachel accuses him of tricking her. The two sit in silence for a moment as the carriage continues its journey toward the city center. An exclamation of surprise breaks the silence as the reality of their arrival sets in. As the carriage stops, Rachel secretly wishes this precious, light-hearted time with him could last forever. The prince reassures her that their destination is very close to the entrance of the shopping district. Rachel steels herself with a silent vow to never choose the wrong path again when she returns to her territory. He calls out to her gently, noticing her momentary lapse into deep thought. She quickly recovers and asks him to lead the way, to which he responds with enthusiastic hope for her enjoyment. The pair steps out of the carriage, ready to immerse themselves in the local culture. Entering the district, the prince marvels at how lively and full of life everyone appears to be. They walk through a bustling marketplace filled with vendors and commoners going about their daily business. Looking at the simple joy around her, Rachel feels a pang of guilt for never trying to understand the lives of the people. They arrive at a charming building where a friendly woman welcomes Luke back to his usual spot. The locals immediately begin teasing him about finally bringing a girl with him on a date. He playfully tries to deflect their jokes while Rachel blushes at the public attention. The prince notes the shop's popularity as the waitress laughs and promises to back off so they can order. Handing her a menu, he claims everything served there is delicious and asks if she has any specific cravings. Rachel continues to struggle with his name, accidentally adding a formal suffix before thanking him for his recommendation. He gives her a dazzling, warm smile that leaves her momentarily stunned and wide-eyed. As they begin their meal, Rachel is delighted by the food while the prince watches her with genuine happiness. Gazing across the table, Rachel shares a final, bittersweet meal with His Highness as they enjoy a rare moment of peaceful companionship. Reflecting on their 3-year history at the restaurant, Rachel notes how accustomed he has become to their routine while he admits his long-standing loyalty. Leaning in with a gentle smile, His Highness confesses that his loyalty stems from his devotion to the things he truly loves, leaving Rachel visibly stunned. Overwhelmed by his sudden sincerity, Rachel's heart races as she struggles to process the weight of his words during their final outing. The restaurant staff warmly teases the couple about their cuteness, urging His Highness to take good care of Rachel while she flushes with embarrassment. A quiet transition falls over the scene as the remains of their meal sit on the table, signaling the end of their time together. His Highness suggests they head back, and Rachel agrees with a heavy heart, knowing their paths are about to diverge. The two walk side by side along the stone path, the distance between them feeling more pronounced as the day draws to a close. His Highness breaks the silence to thank Rachel for spending the day with him, his gratitude feeling like a formal farewell. He admits he has never had such a fun or delicious meal before, while Rachel looks up at him with a mixture of sadness and respect. Standing together by the iron gates, the vast space between them emphasizes the impending separation they both feel. As they prepare to part, the realization that they are leaving now hangs heavy in the air between them. Rachel reflects inwardly on the painful reality that she won't see His Highness for a long time once they part ways today. She mourns the loss of their engagement, realizing she will no longer hear his voice or see his face once she returns to her domain. Filled with regret, Rachel silently apologizes for the situation that she feels cannot be undone. To her surprise, His Highness speaks up, suggesting that there is something to be gained in exchange for this difficult parting. He promises to truly support her as she heads to her domain, expressing his firm belief that she will have grown significantly by the time they meet again. Rachel realizes that while the separation is lonely, his words give her hope that there will indeed be a next time for them. Inspired by his faith in her, Rachel vows to work hard and do everything she can to become someone worthy of standing by his side again. As she starts to walk away, His Highness suddenly reaches out and grabs her arm, stopping her in her tracks. Startled, Rachel turns back to find His Highness looking at her with a desperate, vulnerable expression as he asks her to wait. He immediately apologizes for his impulsive action, his composure momentarily breaking as he struggles with his true feelings. Looking down, His Highness calls her name and prepares to be completely honest about the emotions he has been holding back. He confesses that not having her by his side feels incredibly lonely and that he secretly wishes he could keep her close forever. Understanding the weight of his confession, he admits that such feelings might only be a burden to her during her new journey. Rachel quickly reassures him that his feelings aren't a burden at all, admitting that she has also realized what she still lacks. He vows to work hard to become the kind of man who makes her never want to leave the next time they cross paths. The two share a deep, silent look of mutual understanding and renewed promise as they face the reality of their separation. He urges her to do her best for herself while reminding her never to hesitate to rely on him if anything goes wrong. They both promise to write letters to one another, vowing to share everything they see and feel during their time apart. With a final respectful bow, Rachel prepares to leave, the weight of their promises lingering in the air between them. They share one last lingering look, capturing the image of the other before they finally turn to go their separate ways. Rachel walks away with a determined stride, her silhouette fading as she moves toward her new responsibilities. She acknowledges to herself that she might never be able to let go of her feelings for him, even as she apologizes for the path she must take. Rachel reflects on the fact that their engagement must eventually be broken once His Highness meets the saint, a fate she has long accepted. The word, someday, hangs over her thoughts, representing the uncertain future and the roles they are destined to play. Even if she is no longer the one standing beside him in the future, her devotion remains unchanged as she looks back one last time. She hopes that those around him can live in happiness, content to watch over him from afar if that is what fate requires. Her father and Sarah express their deep loneliness at the thought of the upcoming separation, their faces etched with sadness. As the carriage is prepared, Rachel's father tells her it's time to go, reminding her of the work she must do in the capital. Her father bids her to take care of her health while Rachel tearfully promises to write lots of letters to stay connected. The carriage departs with a flurry of movement, carrying Rachel away toward her new life as those left behind watch her go. The narration notes that the journey to Marquis Marcel's territory usually takes 3 days, but this trip will be different. Considering Rachel's health, they plan a slower 5-day journey, and Sarah joyfully declares that she belongs wherever the young lady goes. Samuel blushes as Rachel thanks him for his consideration, and he admits he enjoys talking about food with her as well. Samuel reveals he has prepared light snacks and lunchboxes for the carriage ride, prompting a light-hearted laugh from the group. Looking ahead, Lord Theodore comments that it looks like it will be a fun and pleasant trip for everyone involved. Theodore questions if things are really okay with the Neo Corporation, while another companion discusses the efficiency of staying close for research. A mysterious, silver-haired man smiles confidently, stating that it is safer if he stays with the group just in case something happens. It is revealed that Lord Theodore will be accompanying them on short notice to investigate the dark spirit and provide personal security for Rachel. Roger, a highly skilled knight from the RD Order, is personally dispatched by His Highness to serve as a secret protector. Despite being a rising star, Roger accepts the meritless guard mission with stoic professionalism, brushing off the lady's guilt. As the carriage rolls toward the new territory, the lady wonders if her silent protector is simply a man who never wastes words. Anticipation builds as the lady stares out the window, eager to discover what new experiences await them at their destination. The journey finally ends with an enthusiastic shout announcing their arrival at the estate. She gazes out at the breathtaking scenery, struck by the sheer beauty of the land. Though the lady is mesmerized by the deep blue, sparkling waters, her maid insists she must rest for a few days per the doctor's orders. While the staff organizes the luggage and stables, a companion jokes that even the black cat will love the local seafood. Her caretaker gently promises that she can explore as much as she likes once her body adjusts to the new environment. The lady offers a final, compliant affirmation as she prepares to settle in. Sometime later, a man arrives at Lady Rachel's door to check if she is finally ready to head out. Radiating excitement, Rachel greets Lord Theodore and declares she is officially good to go. Theodore warmly returns the greeting while Rachel notes that Samuel is already outside checking the day's route with Roger. Rachel credits Theodore's magic control lessons for her feeling great and ready for the day's excursion. Theodore chuckles at her high energy, prompting Rachel to wonder if she is perhaps getting a bit too hyped. Reflecting on her first week, Rachel admits the trip was more exhausting than expected, forcing her to stick to quiet, nearby spots. The long-awaited day finally arrives, and the staff wishes her a wonderful time as she prepares to venture out. Overwhelming excitement takes over as Rachel screams in her mind about finally visiting the market while Theodore obsesses over buying shellfish. Rachel and her companions step into the bustling market, taking in the sights of the local stalls. She marvels at how different the items and the overall atmosphere are compared to the capital. Theodore and Samuel discuss rare ingredients imported from the East, wondering what kind of shop lies ahead. Samuel suddenly stops in his tracks, his face going pale as he stares at something in total shock. He collapses to his knees in the middle of the market, completely overwhelmed by what he has found. Tears stream down Samuel's face as he bellows the names of Izuki and Daizu, leaving the others baffled. Samuel descends into a frantic monologue about making rice koji and red bean paste, while Theodore suggests Rachel explore with Roger instead. Roger and Rachel watch in confusion, questioning if Samuel is crying over long-lost siblings or if he just wanted beans that badly. Theodore stays behind to watch the spiraling Samuel, while Roger formally accepts the duty of guarding Rachel during her walk. Rachel takes Roger up on his offer, and he follows closely behind her as they continue through the town. Spotting a tea shop in the distance, Rachel excitedly points it out to Lord Roger. She remembers seeing the shop earlier and wonders if buying souvenirs like tea and jam would make Sarah happy. A small hand suddenly reaches out and firmly clutches the fabric of Rachel's dress. Rachel stops and turns to find a young, tearful girl holding onto her in the middle of the crowd. Stunned by the girl's crying face, Rachel can only manage a confused, Rachel quickly kneels to the girl's level, asking if she is lost or if something is wrong. With a gentle smile, Rachel tries to comfort the child while asking who she came to the market with. The little girl struggles to find her voice as she continues to sniffle. The child lets out a loud sob, catching Roger's attention as he watches the scene unfold. The girl breaks into a full-blown wail, sending Rachel into a panicked frenzy as she tries to reassure her that everything is okay. Terrified that she made the child cry, Rachel internally screams for help while Roger looks on with a sweat drop. Roger steps in, reaching down to lift the crying girl away from the panicked Rachel. Hoisting the girl onto his shoulders, Roger calmly asks who she was with, to which she whimpers about her big brother and sister. The girl explains they were looking at sweets in front of the candy store before they got separated. She recounts chasing after a big fish she saw right before everyone suddenly disappeared. Roger patiently listens to her story, confirming she was with her siblings before finding herself alone. The girl's eyes well up again as she remembers the terrifying moment everyone was suddenly gone. Rachel quickly chimes in, promising the girl that she will help look for her family too. Roger reassures the child that they will help find them, telling her it was scary but she is safe now. The girl's face lights up with a tearful, happy smile as she thanks them for their kindness. The trio walks through the streets together, Roger leading the way with the child on his shoulders and Rachel by his side. A woman's frantic voice suddenly cuts through the air, screaming the name, Mina, as she spots them. In a burst of joy, a young girl rushes toward Priest Aloys and calls out for him. Dropping to one knee with open arms, the priest prepares to catch the energetic child as she runs at him full tilt. Embracing the girl, Mina, Aloys and her motherly caretaker fuss over her to ensure she isn't hurt after wandering off alone. Rachel and Roger watch the heartwarming reunion with soft smiles, touched by the priest's clear affection for the children. Roger approaches the priest to thank him for looking after Mina while Rachel looks on with a contemplative expression. Aloys humbly brushes off the thanks, insisting that helping a child is only the natural thing for anyone to do. Seeing the group is ready, Aloys asks if the others can be taken back to the church first while he stays behind to finish up. The children bid a fond farewell to Rachel and Roger, calling them Big Brother and Big Sister as they depart. Rachel reflects on the fact that these children are orphans from the church, realizing her previous words might have inadvertently hurt Mina's feelings. Aloys solemnly notes that while it is difficult, these children must eventually learn to overcome the harsh reality of their circumstances. The priest recalls a moment of questioning where a child asked where their mother was, highlighting the pain of their situation. He explains that when these orphans visit the city, they are forced to realize they are different from typical families when they see other children with parents. The conversation shifts back to the orphanage attached to the church, confirming that Mina and the others share the same status as orphans. Rachel remains deeply troubled by the thought that she may have caused the children unnecessary emotional distress. Aloys looks down sadly, explaining that Mina is just beginning to understand that the church staff are not her biological family. Despite the heartbreak, the priest remains firm in his belief that the children must build the strength to move past their origins. Rachel is visibly shaken by the concept of tiny children having to face such a cold and unforgiving reality. Roger listens in silence as the priest begins to explain the deeper motivation behind his dedicated service. Placing a hand over his heart, Aloys declares that he wants to fill their lives with love and knowledge so they can eventually stand on their own. He acknowledges that while it is easy to pity them, mere pity is not what these children truly need to survive. A heavy silence falls over the group as Rachel processes the weight of the priest's selfless mission. Determined to make amends, Rachel asks if it would be permissible for her to visit the church orphanage sometime soon. Aloys beams with a genuine smile, assuring her that he and all the children would be absolutely delighted by her visit. After bidding the kind priest a final farewell, Rachel and Roger prepare to head back as the sun begins to set. Roger remarks on how quickly Mina warmed up to Rachel, noting that looking after the young is often the responsibility of older children. Roger casually reveals his own history, mentioning that he was also raised in a church orphanage. When Rachel reacts with surprise, Roger quickly reassures her that he doesn't mind discussing his past at all. He explains that while orphans are sometimes looked down upon, this country allows a knight to build a life through the strength of their sword. Rachel thanks Roger for his honesty as they look toward the horizon, reflecting on the varying states of church orphanages. The narration explains that while funded by nobles and the state, these institutions are managed strictly by the Holy Church. Rachel recalls her father's warnings that conditions in orphanages vary wildly depending on whether the local lord is dedicated to their care. Sipping tea during a flashback, Rachel listens to her father explain the political complexities of church-run territories. She admits to herself that in her past life, she never felt any connection to or concern for the people living so close to her. Standing between the state and the church, Rachel realizes that today's encounter is her chance to finally take a meaningful step forward. With a new sense of purpose, she decides it is time to seek out Lord Theodore and take action. The scene shifts to a bustling marketplace where a mysterious figure sits waiting on a bench. Rachel and Roger return to find Samuel, who welcomes Lady Rachel back with a slightly mischievous grin. Samuel reveals his eccentric behavior, having ordered an entire shop's worth of beans to be sent to the manor because he worships them. Rachel is stunned to learn that Samuel took off running toward the manor, a journey that usually takes 20 minutes by carriage. Exhausted by the day's events, the group prepares to head home while noting that even Samuel seems to have had a meaningful encounter. Rachel muses that her daily life and even her eating habits are about to undergo another significant shift. True to her word, Rachel arrives at the church a month later and is greeted warmly by a smiling priest Aloys. Aloys laughs with joy, telling Rachel that the children have been waiting for her arrival with great eagerness. A title card marks the beginning of episode. The children swarm Rachel with excitement, shouting, "Welcome," and "Hurry," as they drag her toward their latest project. A young girl proudly presents a tray of cookies, urging Rachel to try the treats they all bake together. While Rachel thanks the children for their hard work, her internal monologue humorously critiques the filthy-looking and awful appearance of the cookies. Rachel notes that the priest was assigned here 3 years ago and was shocked to learn she was the Lord's daughter. Despite learning of her high status, Aloys's kind and humble behavior toward her remained completely unchanged. Rachel reflects on the fact that while status-based behavior is common, she finds it difficult to trust those who only act out of obligation. Rachel reflects on her past inability to form deep connections with others. Observing the kind priest, she realizes that people naturally gravitate toward him because he treats everyone with equal kindness. At the orphanage, Sarah offers to help a girl mend clothes while Roger promises to teach the children swordsmanship once he receives the priest's permission. Rachel watches with a gentle smile as a peaceful atmosphere settles over the group. She feels a growing desire to create more places like this where such tranquility can flourish. A young girl suddenly interrupts Rachel's thoughts to get her attention. The girl curiously asks Rachel if she is planning to marry the prince. Another child chimes in to explain that a fiancé is someone you've promised to marry. Rachel is momentarily stunned by the direct question, her eyes widening in surprise. The children excitedly discuss how amazing it is that Rachel is a princess who will marry a prince. Rachel softly confirms their understanding, explaining that a fiancé is indeed someone you have promised to marry. Little Mina becomes visibly upset, realizing that if Rachel becomes a wife, she might not visit the orphanage anymore. Mina begins to cry, declaring that she hates the prince because he is going to take Rachel away. Struck by Mina's tears, Rachel has a sudden realization about the impact she has on these children. Mina excitedly suggests a new plan. Rachel should simply marry the priest instead. The children cheer for this idea, noting that the priest is kind and cool, while Rachel tries to find the words to respond. The priest appears with a gentle smile, telling the children they shouldn't trouble Lady Rachel too much. He skillfully redirects their energy by announcing that the sisters have prepared snacks and need help. Alone with Rachel, the priest reassures her that the children's sadness over her eventual departure is an important life experience. He apologizes for Mina's behavior, noting that the girl is especially attached to her. Rachel feels a pang of guilt, wondering if she is just toying with the children by coming and going as she pleases. She worries that her presence is only temporary and that her efforts to teach them mean nothing unless they continue. Rachel dejectedly considers if she is the only one who feels a false sense of accomplishment from these visits. The priest firmly challenges her self-doubt, telling her that if she feels that way, she should be the one to change it. He encourages her by stating that if she is already thinking about the future of the orphanage and education, the country will surely improve. Reminding her that all children have a future, he suggests that this truth applies to her as well. The priest admits that even in his mid-20s, he hasn't accomplished everything and often finds the future uncertain. Looking directly at Rachel, he confesses that he simply finds it comfortable to be here, especially when he is with her. In a quiet, intimate moment, he gazes at her and wishes that this time could last just a little longer. Nearby, a cloaked figure named Theodore observes the church and orphanage from the shadows. Theodore watches Rachel and the priest interacting, noticing the happy expression on her face. He muses to himself that the feeling of being needed by others has clearly had a positive effect on Rachel. Rachel is startled when she finally notices Theodore's presence nearby. She asks what brings him there, and Theodore explains he had to come in a hurry for a final visit. Theodore announces that he is heading back to the capital soon and came specifically to say goodbye. Rachel is surprised by the sudden news, thanking him for everything he has done for them. When Rachel asks if he would like to greet the priest, Theodore declines, saying he is in too much of a hurry. Before leaving, Theodore asks Rachel if there is anything she wants him to tell Louis back at the capital. Rachel takes a moment to compose her thoughts, her expression softening as she prepares her message. Theodore promises that he will deliver her words to Louis. With a final wave, Theodore bids them farewell and departs. Theodore walks through the grassy outskirts of the church grounds, heading toward a secluded area. Stopping in the woods, he decides that the spot is secluded enough for his next move. Using magic, Theodore teleports himself directly into the student council room at Torsova Magic Academy. He lands right on top of a desk, much to the shock of the student sitting there. The frustrated student demands to know why Theodore can never show up normally, but Theodore just offers a casual greeting. The student is visibly annoyed by Theodore's dramatic and sudden entrance. Theodore scoffs at the idea of being caught, claiming he knew the room would be empty. Theodore flashes a confident smirk, telling his brother that he knows everything about him. Leaning back, the student decides to put aside his annoyance and hear out whatever news Theodore has brought. Walking away with a weary sigh, the man dismisses the effort spent on such a tiring journey. Watching the black cat closely, the figures conclude that the creature lacks any special power despite its dark spirit nature. Frustration grows as they realize almost all historical documents regarding dark spirits in the country have been intentionally erased. Uncertainty clouds the room as they discuss the lack of confidence in their current theories regarding the dark spirit's true traits. Suspecting a deliberate cover-up, the protagonist ponders who would go to such lengths to erase 2 months of investigation into the spirit's existence. To keep the situation contained, the prince reveals he has limited knowledge of Rachel's contract to a select few high-ranking church officials. The conversation shifts toward the church, an institution known for its deep secrets and guarded history. Acknowledging the church's intense privacy, they weigh the slim chance of obtaining information against the reality of internal leaks being forbidden. The atmosphere turns grave as they review evidence of suspicious magic recently discovered on the frontier. Searching for leverage, the focus shifts to a new, more pressing topic while putting the dark spirit investigation on the back burner. Tasked with joining the Mage Corps for support, one partner leaves the other to handle the spirit investigation alone. Exhaustion sets in as one problem follows another, leaving the prince wondering what new complication is heading his way. The discussion turns to academy politics, specifically Ernest's annoying push to get a favored student into the student council. Mentioning Ernest's relation to Lady Rachel, the prince confirms that while the girl has good grades, the situation remains complicated. Memories of the academy's social circle and student interactions flash by, highlighting the trivial nature of the current drama. Mocking the prince's heavy workload, his companion teases him about being the academy's poor prince, who shoulders everyone else's problems. Listing his duties from crown prince to council president, his friend offers a present that the prince immediately suspects is something weird. The prince's heart skips a beat when he hears the present is actually a personal message from Lady Rachel. They sit in anticipation as the message is delivered. Lady Rachel claims she is close to finding the answer. The prince processes her claim with a mixture of hope and skepticism while his friend watches his reaction closely. Noticing the change in his demeanor, the companion smirks at how soft the prince has become regarding Lady Rachel compared to his past indifference. A subtle warning is issued that staying quiet for too long might lead to someone else taking her away. The image of another man getting close to Rachel serves as a silent, jarring provocation. Abruptly ending the meeting, the companion heads out to check in with the Mage Corps, leaving the prince in a daze. Flushed and desperate, the prince grabs his friend's arm and begs to know if Rachel said anything else. Teasing him further, the friend mentions an amazing encounter Rachel supposedly had lately that changed her. The prince listens in shock as his friend claims Rachel's heart was totally stolen in a single moment. Frozen by the word fate, the prince demands to know exactly what is meant by this fated encounter. Desperation leads to a physical confrontation as the prince tries to block his friend from leaving without answers. Despite the prince's protests, his companion moves toward the door, leaving him alone with his spiraling thoughts. The door clicks shut, marking the end of the meeting and the start of the prince's internal panic. Outside, the companion remains calm, wearing a small, knowing smile after stirring up the prince's emotions. Laughing at the prince's dramatic reaction, the companion admits the story about Samuel and the beans was a complete lie intended to make him lose it. Reflecting on the prince's youth, the companion decides it's time to get back to their own duties. Moving down the hallway, the companion prepares to return to the serious work at hand. Elsewhere, Lady Rachel is interrupted during her studies and gives permission for a visitor to enter. Her maid informs her that a priest has arrived to return something she left at the church and is waiting in the parlor. The priest stands alone by the window, silhouetted against the light as he waits for Lady Rachel. Rachel enters the room and apologizes for the wait, warmly greeting the priest as her maids prepare tea. Rachel insists the priest could have held onto the item until her next visit, but he politely claims he had business nearby. The priest charmingly notes that the trip was worth it just to see her face, prompting a modest reaction from Rachel. Turning the conversation to her good deeds, the priest mentions he's heard about her efforts to help local children. Rachel discusses her ongoing efforts to reassess education in the Marcel territory, though she admits her plans are still being discussed with her parents. Reflecting on her time at the orphanage, Rachel expresses her deep desire to improve the overall education system for the territory's youth. She notes the harsh reality that current schools are only for those who can afford them, leaving orphans stuck in a cycle of poverty. Rachel envisions a future where all children, regardless of their status, have a chance to succeed. Driven by her own experience of being given a second chance, she argues that those in harsh circumstances deserve a fair opportunity to begin again. Her ultimate goal is to empower these children so they have the strength to change their own futures. Rachel passionately declares that education should be equal for all, allowing everyone to pave their own path through knowledge rather than just natural talent. Despite her lack of real power making the journey frustrating, Rachel expresses her profound gratitude to the priest for his support in her first steps forward. The priest smiles gently, telling Rachel that her own courage, not his help, is what truly allowed her to move forward. Trembling and feeling like a coward, Rachel admits her legs shake at the very first step of the path she knows she must take. Paralyzed by the fear of repeating past mistakes, she wonders if her actions are truly selfless or if she will only end up hurting others again. Looking at her with deep empathy, the priest asks if she still intends to move forward despite those lingering fears. Finding her resolve, Rachel looks up with a soft smile and confirms that she will indeed keep going. The priest admits his own perceived weakness, noting how comfortable it feels to be around someone like her. He reflects on his past, explaining how he became a priest simply to follow his family's tradition without any personal passion or goals. Though he feels he can no longer change, he finds Rachel's strength unique because she refused to be swept along by her circumstances. Walking away into the light, the priest expresses his sincere desire to keep watching to see the person Rachel eventually becomes. Startled by his cryptic parting words about being drawn to her, Rachel tries to question him, but he quickly dismisses it and prepares to leave for the children. With a final, serious glance, the priest asks her to please forget his last comment as he walks toward the exit. Rachel stands alone in the room, momentarily confused by the priest's sudden change in demeanor and abrupt departure. Noticing a vase of lilies, the priest mentions they were his grandmother's favorite and wonders how his family is faring since he rarely returns home. Rachel offers a kind word, assuring him that his grandmother would be incredibly proud to see the man he has become. Giving a final farewell, the priest tells her he will be waiting at the church for their next meeting. The scene shifts as the priest departs, leaving the estate quiet for a brief moment of reflection. Somewhere else in the house, a playful scolding occurs over a child named Samuel sneaking treats again. The peaceful atmosphere is shattered as a maid rushes through the halls, frantically calling out for her lady. Breathless and panicked, the maid Sarah informs a shocked Rachel that a messenger from His Highness has just arrived with terrible news. The messenger reveals the urgent situation. His Highness has left the capital and is already heading toward their location. Rachel stands frozen in absolute disbelief as the entire household descends into a flurry of chaotic preparation. Confused because Lord Theodore only left a week ago, Rachel is whisked away by her maids to change clothes immediately for the prince's sudden arrival. The estate looms under a darkening sky as everyone reels from the shock of the prince's unannounced visit. Outside, the sound of galloping horses signals the arrival of the royal party at the front gates. A mysterious hooded figure leads the small group of riders toward the main entrance of the estate. The staff gathers at the door, bowing deeply as they prepare to welcome the royal guest. Prince Mikhail removes his hood and greets a stunned Rachel, apologizing for his sudden arrival without any prior notice. He explains that he had urgent business in the neighboring donation territory and decided to stay the night while passing through. Rachel feels a mixture of guilt for the lack of a proper greeting and overwhelming happiness that he stopped to see her. Blushing, she thinks to herself how truly happy she is just to be able to see his face again. When Rachel offers to prepare a guest room, the prince politely declines, explaining that his aide Cyril has already handled their lodging. Eager to spend time with him, Rachel quickly pivots and invites him to join them for dinner instead. After a brief, thoughtful pause, the prince smiles and graciously accepts her invitation. Relieved, the prince remarks that Rachel looks much healthier than she did back in the capital, which brings him great peace of mind. Reaching out, the prince takes her hand and asks her to tell him everything that has happened since they last met. He speaks her name softly, leaning in close and admitting how much he has truly missed her. Rachel is visibly moved, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and burgeoning affection as she looks at the prince. Overwhelmed by his directness, a flustered Rachel stammers through her hospitality, urging him to make himself comfortable until dinner is served. The household staff watches the intimate interaction from a distance, noting the clear spark between the two. During dinner, Rachel admits that because she left the territory so young, she had almost no memories of the sea and initially felt unwell from the excitement. She brightens up, sharing how she has found a lovely tea shop and has finally been able to enjoy solo walks through the local markets. The prince listens intently before mentioning that he saw a priest leaving the estate just as he was arriving. Rachel realizes she hasn't yet shared the important news regarding her recent activities and the people she has met. She prepares to explain the significance of the priest's visit and her newfound connection to the local orphanage. The prince asks with a serious expression if the rumors he heard from Lord Theodore about her recent actions are true. Rachel is caught off guard, wondering exactly what Lord Theodore told him about her encounters. She clarifies if he is referring to the incident at the market where she first met the people from the orphanage. Smiling brightly, she confirms that while it started by chance, it has turned out to be a wonderful connection for her. She expresses her joy that he already knew about the orphanage, explaining how fulfilling it is to spend time teaching the children there. Inspired by the prince's vision for the country, Rachel vows to help the children learn to read so that no one is left in the dark. At the dinner table, the prince tensely asks his fiancée about her relationship with the priest. Leaning forward with a pained expression, he demands to know if the man is truly someone important to her. While the prince's thoughts spiral, the fiancée recalls how the priest gave her the courage to step forward when she was afraid. Agitated by her hesitation, the prince cuts her off and declares that he has heard enough about the man. Covering his face in a moment of distress, the prince sighs heavily as his attendants look on with concern. Reaching his limit, he apologizes but insists he can no longer bear to hear her speak of that man. Softening his gaze, he acknowledges the priest's importance but firmly reminds her that she is currently his fiancée. He gazes directly at her and asks with quiet intensity if she will please look at him. Overwhelmed, she confesses that she only saw him on a surface level and was a fool to try and force her into a mold. She admits her own foolishness for ignoring commoners and those with little magic while he has clearly changed. In a moment of deep insecurity, he looks away and whispers that he feels unworthy of her and fears she won't stay by his side. Stunned by his confession, she can only stare at him in silence as the word unworthy echoes in her mind. Thinking to herself, she feels she is actually the one unfit to be crown princess and worries she would only hold him back. Despite his doubts, the prince looks at her with a gentle smile and expresses his desire to bring her back to the capital. The two share a quiet, lingering look as the weight of his proposal hangs in the air between them. As she envisions a wedding, she wonders if he truly still wants her to be his fiancée. Her heart pounding, she frantically searches for the right words to say to him. They stand apart in the room, the silence growing heavy as she struggles to articulate her feelings. Deciding to end the evening, the prince stands up and excuses himself, fearing he might hurt her if he stays any longer. He promises to visit one last time before leaving tomorrow, gently declining her offer to see him out. Accompanied by his aide, the prince walks through the large double doors and departs into the bright hallway. Back in her room, the fiancée stands alone by the bed and gazes out the window into the darkness. Peering through the curtains, she looks lost in thought as she reflects on the night's events. She notes a newfound tenderness in his gaze and wonders if she is being conceited to think he truly cares for her. Questioning everything, She asks herself what she would do if his feelings for her were actually real. Clutching the curtain, she thinks about the feelings for the prince she had decided to seal away in a locked box. She imagines the prince standing happily with the saint and realizes she might not be able to contain her jealousy. Despair washes over her as she admits to herself that her feelings have grown even stronger than before. Trembling on the floor, she cries out that she doesn't want to lose him or the life she has built. She berates herself for such a selfish wish, yet her heart refuses to let go of the future she desires. Resolving to reach for a new future, she decides she must strive toward a change within herself. Under a bright sky, she meets him outside as he prepares to depart. They exchange apologies for the previous day, with Rachel expressing her regret for making him feel uncomfortable. The prince asks if he may stop by again after he returns from the donation territory. She realizes she needs more time to sort out her own feelings and acknowledges her own past failings. With a bright and genuine smile, she tells him that she would of course welcome his return. As he prepares to leave, she stops him to clarify a potential misunderstanding. Tentatively, she hands him a letter and asks if he would read what she has been thinking since she hasn't fully grasped her feelings yet. He accepts the letter with a warm smile and promises her that he will definitely read it. Her maid Sarah watches from the side, a soft and knowing expression on her face. Sarah approaches with a smile and tells her lady it's time to head back inside before she catches a chill. Walking back, Rachel looks at her maid with a gentle, appreciative smile. Rachel suddenly vows to protect Sarah, catching her maid completely off guard. Meanwhile, at the church, the priest looks out the window as children play happily outside. A title card marks the conclusion of the 10th episode. The scene transitions to the exterior of a building as the narrative continues. 3 days have passed since the prince left for the donation territory, and Rachel finds herself lost in thought in the library. She worries because there has been no word from him, wondering if he read her letter or if she wrote something wrong. Staring into the distance, she anxiously asks herself what could be going on with him. Far away, the priest stands in silence, his expression unreadable as the mystery deepens. Standing in a room filled with heavy sighs and spacing out, Rachel's internal turmoil is immediately apparent to the priest. Distracted by her thoughts, Rachel barely notices the children leaving to get snacks while the priest observes her quiet distress. Concerned by her melancholy, the priest gently asks if something is troubling her. Rachel thanks him but insists this is a personal challenge she must face on her own. The priest smiles, noting that Lady Rachel has always been a remarkably straightforward person. He admits that her constant consideration for others makes her a wonderful person and gives him the strength to be stronger too. Setting a teacup down with a soft sound, the priest asks if he may share a dream that won't come true with her. He recalls his childhood as the disappointing sibling, lacking the strong magic and bright futures of his older brothers. Born into a priestly family but barely able to see spirits, he lived a life defined by following his family's commands rather than his own desires. Believing himself a dullard, he resigned himself to a quiet life of obscurity, moving between rural churches at his brother's beck and call. To his parents, he was merely a disappointment who needed to stay out of the way of his more talented brothers. Rachel listens in shock, having always assumed the calm and kind priest was surrounded by a loving family rather than one that viewed him as a burden. He explains that while he found peace and laughter with the children at the countryside church, everything changed the moment Rachel appeared. Confused by his intensity, Rachel listens as he confesses that being with her makes him wish this future could last forever. Though he knows she is the crown prince's fiancée, he admits he didn't want their peaceful life together to end. The priest reveals his knowledge that her engagement is unlikely to continue, shocking her with his insight into the truth. He explains that his family's central position in the church provides him with a wealth of information about her secret situation. He mentions the black cat, hinting that he knows even the most guarded secrets of her current life. Urging her not to be on guard, the priest promises not to harm the spirit and asks if she would consider a future with him instead. Rachel reels in panic, wondering exactly how much this man knows about her and her spirit, Kuro. Despite the uncertainty of her engagement, Rachel firmly rejects his offer, stating she is still the crown prince's fiancée and cannot accept. Accepting her refusal with a dark, resigned look, the priest notes that it is unfortunate and that there is now no other choice. With a chilling smile and magic swirling around him, the priest asks Rachel if they should simply elope right now. Rachel gasps in confusion and alarm as the atmosphere shifts dangerously around her. A sharp cry rings out as the situation takes a sudden, violent turn. Clinging to her head in pain, Rachel realizes a sweet scent is filling the air and something is being burned. The priest catches her as she collapses, whispering that it is only sleeping incense and that everything will be okay. As Rachel loses consciousness, he cradles her and promises to protect her. The priest stands alone in the room, holding the unconscious Rachel in his arms as the smoke from the incense drifts around them. Original author Aoi reflects on Rachel's growth in volume, praising Sakamoto-sensei's depiction of her determined eyes and shifting emotions. A lone man in a military uniform stands looking out a window, his expression unreadable. Theodore wonders if his new appearance will allow him to more casually hold Rachel's hand. He worries that his touch might be too casual, but he is interrupted when Rachel calls out to him. Rachel arrives at Theodore's door late at night, apologizing for the hour and asking for a moment of his time. Theodore apologizes for his messy appearance as he moves to open the door for her. Stunned by her beauty with her hair down, Theodore finds her dazzling and briefly fails to recognize her. A vibrant color illustration shows Rachel and Theodore standing together, her hand resting gently in his. Theodore sits alone, looking dejected while holding a letter addressed to Mr. Liu, from Yar. 1 week earlier, the palace is in an uproar as the name, Cyril, is called out during a frantic search. Theodore shouts for his men to prepare to head to Lady Rachel's location immediately, leaving Cyril in total shock. Cyril tries to protest that they are overwhelmed with work, but Theodore insists they are going even if it seems impossible. Theodore is obsessed with stopping what he calls Rachel's fated encounter. Cyril sighs in exhaustion, feeling they are about to be dragged into another one of His Highness's dumb, impulsive plans. Cyril reminds the prince that Rachel has returned to the Marcel territory and he cannot simply leave the capital on a whim. He lectures Theodore on the waste of taxpayer money and the massive escort of knights and mages required for a royal visit to a vassal's domain. Theodore begrudgingly admits Cyril is right and agrees to stay, telling his aide to calm down. They head back toward the office, with Cyril letting out a relieved phew that the crisis was averted. With a predatory, crazed look in his eyes, Theodore suddenly declares that he has found it. Theodore asks Cyril if he knows about the Lord of Donation's recent splurging, laughing ominously as he plots his next move. Noting suspicious discrepancies in the donation documents, Theodore decides they need an immediate, on-site investigation as a pretext to leave the capital. Cyril investigates the sudden wealth of a baron whose crop yields have plummeted, noticing the man's suspicious, smug demeanor. Determined to find the truth, the prince orders a secret investigation into donation territory to gather evidence before the baron can cover his tracks. To reach their destination, the small group realizes they must navigate through the neighboring Marcel territory. The prince commands Cyril to prepare escorts and travel gear for a departure the following morning after informing His Majesty. With a chilling and intense expression, the prince warns Cyril not to dare forget the gravity of their mission. Cyril is stunned by the prince's Demon King aura, noting how much his personality has shifted since meeting Lady Rachel. Upon arriving at the donation estate, the prince boldly announces a search for embezzlement while Cyril pityingly notes the baron was just an excuse to visit Marcel territory. Reflecting on the past, Cyril recalls a time when the prince's gentle presence made everyone smile like an angel. The prince was once like a storybook character, maintaining a wavering and beautiful smile in front of others. Now, the prince sits slumped in despair, unable to even open a letter from his fiancée that has been sitting for 3 days. Cyril recalls the moment the prince spotted a specific priest leaving the lord's manor in Marcel. The sight of the hooded figure triggers a deep, silent realization within the prince as he gazes intently at the stranger. Even while witnessing the poverty of the Salim district, the prince's eyes burned with a new, unextinguishable flame. Cyril identifies the man as Alois Watteau, a name he remembers from intelligence gathered around the church. He wonders why a son from such a prestigious family and the high priest's aide would be stationed in the countryside. In a moment of vulnerability, the prince asks Cyril if he thinks Lady Rachel actually dislikes him. Cyril bluntly reminds His Highness that the answer to that question should already be in his hands. The prince finally begins to open the correspondence with a mixture of hesitation and longing. He sits alone in the quiet room, his focus entirely consumed by the paper in his hands. A slight blush creeps onto the prince's face as he reads the words written by his fiancée. Cyril observes that the prince's emotions have become significantly easier to read ever since Lady Rachel's last visit. Whether this newfound emotional transparency is a positive or negative change remains uncertain to his loyal aide. A brief moment of silence follows as the narrative shifts toward the prince's internal reaction. Despite the prince's frantic denial, Cyril admits he doesn't actually mind the changes he's seeing in his master. The prince continues to issue unreasonable demands, but Cyril has grown accustomed to being dragged around. When asked for his plans, the prince orders Cyril to return to the capital with the baron while he remains in Marseille territory. Cyril erupts in a desperate plea for appreciation, flatly rejected by the prince after all his hard work. He fumes over being constantly dragged around by both the prince and Lord Theodore. Suddenly, an alert Cyril turns toward the door and demands to know who is there. It is Roger, a member of Lady Rachel's escort detail, who arrives with a look of pure panic. The prince commands him to enter as the knight stands trembling at the threshold. Roger offers a profound apology, his face pale with the weight of his news. The knight delivers the devastating report that Lady Rachel has apparently been kidnapped. In her letter, Rachel clarifies that she respects the priest but holds no romantic affection for him. She expresses that she has never forgotten her position as the prince's fiancée, though the prince is now left questioning everything. The report continues that Rachel had visited the church today to meet with the priest. Instead of a meeting, she and the priest disappeared, leaving behind only a single note. The prince's shock turns to fury at the mention of the priest's involvement. The note left behind asks for forgiveness for abandoning everything for love, suggesting an elopement. The prince refuses to believe such a thing is possible, despite the evidence of the note. A stunned silence hangs in the air as they contemplate the possibility of Lady Rachel running away. The prince recalls Rachel's kind smile and her promise to see him again after his return from donation. He is devastated by the thought that her recent words and smiles might have been nothing but a lie. Cyril quickly points out that the note wasn't even written in Rachel's handwriting, suggesting the priest is the true architect. Turning his cold rage toward Roger, the prince demands to know exactly what the guard was doing while this happened. Refusing to accept a simple apology, the prince presses for the details of the knight's failure. Roger explains that children from the orphanage gave him cookies, and he remembers nothing after eating them until waking up hours later. The prince realizes the priest drugged Roger, knowing the knight's soft spot for the children of the orphanage. The prince immediately orders a move to the church, telling Roger his punishment will wait until after Rachel is found. With eyes full of murderous intent, the prince and his loyal knight swear to make the priest pay for his actions. Fueled by a burning rage, the protagonist vows he will never forgive the man who took Rachel from him. Upon arriving at the scene, the writers are met by a distraught servant addressing them as Your Highness. Terrified and in denial over the lady's disappearance, Sarah begs the prince to go inside and rest while she waits for her mistress's return. Desperate for a miracle, the maid implores His Highness to find the lady, offering any help she can possibly provide. While a mysterious figure watches, the prince reassures the sobbing girl that they will find her lady. Steeled with resolve, the prince makes a solemn promise to bring Rachel back safe and sound. He urges the servant to rest, noting that Rachel would feel responsible if her staff fell ill from worry. Turning his focus to the investigation, the prince commands the sister to reveal everything she knows about the situation. Confused by the sudden turn of events, the church staff explains that Priest Aloys had been acting completely normal before the disappearance. The staff recounts how Rachel and the others arrived exactly at the promised time after the priest had finished his morning routine. The mystery deepens as they recall finding Lord Roger resting unusually after they had finished cleaning another room. During the quiet morning, the children had even prepared cookies as gifts for Rachel and Roger while she was scheduled to help organize the library. The sisters explain how they initially dismissed Rachel's absence as a simple exhaustion-induced nap until they searched the rooms and discovered a note. Leading the prince to the scene of the crime, the sister confirms that the suspicious note was discovered right inside the priest's room. After thanking the staff for their guidance, the prince orders them to look after Sarah and the children while his men begin a thorough search for clues. The investigation uncovers church financial documents and a research group invitation among the piles of mundane paperwork. Frustrated by the lack of immediate leads, the prince curses as he finds nothing but boring church administration files. To their surprise, a subordinate discovers a false bottom in one of the drawers containing something unexpected. They find a collection of letters sent from various members of the Watteau family, including a man named Raymond. The subordinate reveals that Priest Aloys is the third son of the prestigious Watteau family, whose relatives all hold high-ranking positions within the church's core. Impressed by the depth of his subordinate's knowledge, the prince acknowledges the exceptional quality of his men. Realizing the priest must have been incredibly discreet, the prince orders a full audit of all the room's contents to find any possible destination. The prince grows agitated as he searches the wardrobe, realizing that the lack of horse or carriage tracks suggests the abductor hasn't gone far. A familiar, mocking voice cuts through the tension, asking Louis if he has decided to switch his career to thievery. Shocked by the sudden appearance of Theodore and Chloe, the prince demands to know why they are interfering with his investigation. Despite the prince's impatient dismissal, the newcomer insists that Louis will definitely want to hear what they have discovered. Theodore urges the prince to calm down so they can properly compare information regarding the ongoing crisis. The group reveals that the incident in the Borderlands was actually the result of a forbidden spell. The prince recoils in shock at the mention of the word, forbidden. While acknowledging that forbidden magic can control memories, the prince argues that such a feat would require a massive amount of mana that the priest shouldn't possess. Questioning the traces found in the Borderlands, the prince concludes it is highly unlikely that a common priest could harbor such immense power. Growing increasingly irritated by the cryptic talk, the prince demands to know the direct connection to Rachel's current location. The visitors mockingly note how the prince completely loses his cool the moment Rachel's safety is at stake. A mysterious title, Spirit Slayer, is mentioned as a potential key to the mystery. The prince is stunned as he is told that the very foundation of their world is actually constructed from magic. They explain how humans merely borrow power through contracts with spirits of the elements, ruled by the king of light spirits. Looking at the history of their world, they note how these primal spirit powers have been both a catalyst for civilization and a tool for war. The shocking truth is revealed that the true target of the Spirit Slayer is likely a specific child they are chasing. Along with the child, the speaker identifies another key figure who will finally lead them to Lady Rachel. Somewhere in a quiet, dimly lit room, Rachel lies unconscious on a bed. Waking up in a daze, Rachel looks around the unfamiliar room and wonders where on earth she has been taken. Driven by curiosity and fear, she gets out of bed and moves toward the window to get her bearings. Looking out at the pitch-black night, Rachel is horrified to realize how much time must have passed since she left for the church in the morning. She stands alone in the silence of the cabin, searching for any sign of her captor. Suddenly, the door creaks open and Priest Aloys enters carrying a tray of tea, prompting Rachel to recoil in shock. Rachel lets out a terrified scream as she retreats from the man, while the priest offers a soft, apologetic smile for scaring her. Aloys calmly promises that he has absolutely no intention of harming her despite the current circumstances. Rachel remains skeptical, pointing out the undeniable fact that he dragged her to this place against her will. With a chillingly nonchalant attitude, the priest admits to the abduction but insists that everything is going to be okay. Ignoring her visible distress, Aloys politely offers Rachel a cup of tea as if they were merely guests in his home. Confusion reigns as Rachel realizes the room is empty and the situation is far from what she expected. Standing in a strange, wooden interior, Rachel nervously asks where they are while a mysterious man observes her. The man explains they are in a house deep in the forest near the church, formerly owned by an old lady who moved away. Distrustful and cold, Rachel demands to know the reason she was brought to such a secluded location. With a calm and unsettling intensity, the man reminds her that he wants a future with her. He suggests they can live here together without interference, even offering to move to a larger place if this one feels too cramped. Visualizing their domestic life, he casually mentions adding a flower bed to the garden for her. Rachel is internally horrified that he acts exactly as he did at the church despite having just kidnapped a marquis daughter. She struggles to comprehend how he can maintain such a normal demeanor in a situation this criminal and extreme. Trembling, she looks at him and wonders if everything he has said is merely a lie. Rachel pleads with him to stop, arguing that he shouldn't betray the people and children he cared for at the church just to be with her. The priest admits the church was the first place he felt comfortable, but claims that life was never truly right for him. He explains that staying there only leads to more misunderstandings. Rachel is confused by his words as images of the peaceful life at the church and the smiling children flash through her mind. With a chilling smile, he declares that he did it simply because he fell in love with her and asks if that isn't reason enough. He prepares to elaborate on why he specifically needs to be with her and what made his previous life so difficult. Rachel snaps, calling his words irresponsible and mean, refusing to believe love is his only motive. While he covers his face and insists he is drawn to her sincerity, Rachel realizes his goal isn't a romantic elopement at all. Sudden movement startles them both as the atmosphere in the room shifts. Rachel spots a door and realizes it is likely the only exit from the house. A sudden, bright, magical flare erupts as the priest reaches out, sensing an intruder. He turns back to her, mockingly asking if she still wants to know his true purpose. He laments that there is no longer time for explanations as the situation outside turns volatile. A thunderous voice screams Rachel's name as the door is violently breached. A blond man bursts in, calling the priest a bastard while a stunned Rachel recognizes her savior as His Highness. With a powerful strike, the newcomer attacks the priest with incredible speed. The force of the blow sends the priest crashing backward into the wooden furniture. The blond man stands over the fallen priest, breathing heavily and ready for more. He rushes to Rachel's side, frantically checking her for any signs of injury or pain. Rachel can barely speak, still in shock as she addresses her rescuer. Relief washes over them as he pulls her into a tight, protective embrace. He whispers that she is safe now and apologizes for his late arrival. Rachel looks up at him with tear-filled eyes, finally beginning to process her rescue. The priest watches them from the floor, bloodied but conscious, as the two lovers cling to each other. The rescuer turns his fury back to the priest, demanding to know what he planned to do to Rachel. Bleeding from the mouth, the priest smirks and mockingly asks what he was planning. He brazenly claims that the intruder is the one being rude by interrupting a private meeting between lovers. Outraged, the prince shouts that Rachel is already someone's fiancée and should not be touched. The priest scoffs, suggesting that her current engagement won't last much longer anyway. A third party enters the fray, telling everyone to calm down before things escalate further. The newcomer laughs, noting that the priest has been roughed up quite a bit. The prince remains furious, demanding the priest be jailed immediately for the abduction. A black cat suddenly appears on the prince's head, momentarily breaking the tension as a new character enters. Rachel calls out to the cat, Kuro, as she questions why the animal and its owner are even there. She leans down and tenderly picks up the cat, holding it close to her face. A moment of peace returns to Rachel's face as she nuzzles the familiar animal. The mysterious companion tells Lewis to stay calm while warning the priest to stop his needless provocations. Now that the mood has settled, the man asks the priest to finally explain why he kidnapped Rachel. The priest cryptically implies that the reason will soon become clear. The man accuses the priest of being the one who lured them all to this specific spot. In a haze of confusion, voices cry out and question the unfolding chaos as the reality of the situation begins to blur. A lingering regret haunts the silence, expressed through a pained wish that things could have been different if only there had been enough strength. Desperate to change the past, a resolve forms to have guided a younger self toward a path of greater resilience and agency. Clinging to the hope of independence, the speaker yearns for the power to stand firm and choose a destiny free from outside control. The ultimate desire remains the ability to act and decide based entirely on one's own internal conviction and will. Shifting the focus to the present, the speaker confronts the antagonist, revealing they have finally grasped the truth behind the deception that lured them there. A cold, steady gaze meets the listener as a command is issued to listen closely to what is about to be revealed. Challenging the captor, the speaker brings up the abduction of Lady Rachel and suggests the involvement of their father and brother, prompting a cynical invitation to be arrested. With a knowing smirk, the interrogator posits that the orders of the family were not actually followed as intended. Alois Watteau maintains a mask of stoicism while insisting that as a member of his house, he would never dream of betraying his own blood. The tension rises as a command is given to Cyril to produce a specific letter that serves as crucial evidence in the investigation. Theodore and Rachel look on in shocked silence, confused by the sudden mention of a letter and the gravity of the prince's actions. The investigator accuses Alois of deliberately orchestrating the abduction to ensure the letter, containing orders from his family, would be discovered. Cyril begins to recount the damning contents of the letter, starting with the chilling directive that the dark spirit must be eliminated. The letter's instructions continue, detailing the mandate to report the spirit immediately and the disturbing news that a spirit-killing technique had been perfected. Terror strikes the onlookers as they realize the spirit killer is a forbidden and horrific art that should never have been utilized. Rachel clutches the black cat Kuro tightly, her face reflecting the growing horror of the dark conspiracy surrounding her companion. Prince Lys looks toward Rachel with a soft, protective expression, his silent resolve contrasting with her wide-eyed shock. The prince explains that certain extremist factions within the church view light and darkness as literal moral opposites, leading to a deep-seated hatred for dark spirits. He notes that a priestly family with a long, prestigious history would be even more likely to harbor such radical, exclusionary beliefs. The investigation focuses back on Alois Watteau, the man standing at the center of this clash between church tradition and royal protection. It is revealed that Alois's grandfather held the highest position of power as the previous high priest, cementing the family's massive influence. The realization sinks in that a priest born into such a powerful lineage possesses an immense amount of social and political weight. Rachel reflects on the church's prejudice, realizing they saw Kuro as a threat based on selfish dogma despite the spirit's harmless nature. Overcome with indignation, Rachel declares that trying to erase an innocent child like Kuro based on twisted truths is absolutely unforgivable. Prince Lise apologizes for not foreseeing the danger, but Rachel quickly interjects, blaming her own lack of insight for the seriousness of the situation. The prince reflects on the history of the church, realizing his father's deep concern stemmed from knowing how the organization would react to a dark spirit contract. Offering comfort, the prince tells Rachel that it is okay to rely on others to fill the gaps in one's own abilities rather than carrying every burden alone. He emphasizes that she does not have to face the weight of her responsibilities or her past in total isolation. Rachel is stunned by the idea of mutual reliance, as she had always lived under the impression that she had to accomplish everything by herself. The group stands together in the soft light, a visual testament to the support system that Rachel is finally beginning to recognize. The realization that relying on others isn't a weakness washes over Rachel, softening her gaze as she accepts the help being offered. She wonders if she truly has the capacity to be someone who can support others in return for the kindness shown to her. The prince summarizes the plot, explaining that Alois used his assignment at the church to get close to Rachel and confirm Kuro's presence at his family's request. Facing the truth at last, the priest looks away and quietly confirms that the prince's deduction of the events is correct. Alois admits that while the initial situation happened by chance, he did approach Rachel under the specific direction of his father and brother. A hand reaches out toward Rachel's face in a sudden, confusing gesture that leaves both her and the prince startled. The prince reveals that Alois was the anonymous whistleblower who tipped off the Mage Corps about suspicious magic, effectively sabotaging his own family's mission. By leaving evidence and sending the tip, Alois ensured the authorities would protect Rachel while making the leak look like a natural consequence of his brother's actions. The contradictory nature of the priest's actions comes to light, revealing he helped the prince notice the danger despite not openly defying his family. Alois accepts his fate, stating that the moment he abducted Rachel, he knowingly became a criminal who must face judgment. The prince questions why Alois chose such a convoluted and self-destructive path instead of simply contacting the royals more clearly. He points out that a direct report would have earned him gratitude from the church headquarters and avoided a criminal record entirely. Rachel looks on with pity, realizing the immense pressure and inner conflict Alois must have faced while caught between his family and his conscience. It becomes clear that the priest was raised with the sole purpose of supporting his brother, making a direct betrayal psychologically impossible for him. Rachel observes the depth of his inner turmoil, understanding the massive emotional cost of his silent rebellion. She realizes with a start that Alois did exactly what she had hoped for. He changed his deeply ingrained beliefs and acted on his own will. Alois looks directly at the group and admits that he never truly intended to betray his family in his heart. He confesses that although he found his family's ideas absurd and felt resentment, he felt he had no choice but to go along with their wishes. In a final moment of vulnerability, the priest bows his head and admits he is no longer certain of what he truly believes. Soft memories of a peaceful childhood fade as the narrator reveals their life was never their own. Every major life decision was dictated by their parents and brothers, leaving them like a puppet in a dark void. Resigned to a life of hollow obedience, they resolved to calmly follow any order until the day their existence inevitably ended. Maintaining a mask of stoic indifference, they prepared to meet their fate without a single ripple of extra emotion. Standing alone and looking back, the priest realizes that somewhere along the way, he gained something far more precious than his family's rigid orders. Rachel stares in shock as the priest admits that she is included in the list of things he considers irreplaceable. Reflecting on their journey, he confesses that the days spent with her and her unwavering gaze were truly precious to him. Captivated by Rachel's way of life, he declares from the bottom of his heart that he would have supported any path she chose. Despite finding his own family's actions hopeless and criminal, the priest remains bound by blood and refuses to abandon them. Facing Rachel's frantic questions, he admits with a bittersweet smile that in the end, he was unable to change his fundamental nature. Rachel is devastated by the realization that the priest's internal conflict regarding his family is far more complex than she imagined. The narrative shifts to emphasize how differently the priest views his kin compared to how the outside world perceives them. A vision of the priest as a child holding hands with his family suggests a past filled with innocent connections. Beneath the layers of family scandal lie happy memories and deep-seated emotions that the priest can never truly erase. Caught between his loyalty to the church and his devotion to his family, the priest finds himself hopelessly entangled in two conflicting chains. Clutching her cat, Rachel wonders what heavy thoughts he carried and if she even has the right to speak so lightly of his burden. Standing before the authorities, the priest calmly acknowledges the impending arrest of his father and brother. He reflects on the irony of life, noting that his family will likely resent being outdone by their useless son. Prince Elliot confirms that using forbidden arts and attempting to harm a spirit are grave crimes that cannot be ignored. Rejecting any chance of escape, the priest insists on atoning for these crimes alongside his family, even if it leads to their mutual downfall. A close-up of the priest's face reveals a somber acceptance of the foolish path he has chosen to walk. With a gentle, pained smile, he admits to himself that he finds his own decision just as foolish as she does. Prince Elliot grants the priest permission to speak his final request despite his fallen position. Bound and ready to be taken away, the priest asks that a good successor be chosen for the children and sisters of the church who were innocent bystanders. The prince gives his word that he will inform the main cathedral and see to it that the priest's request is honored. A silent, tearful close-up captures the priest's final moment of emotional release before being led away. The sun sets over the horizon, signaling the end of this dark chapter and the priest's time at the church. As a carriage rattles away, Rachel realizes with a heavy heart that the priest was actually protecting her all along. Overwhelmed by the truth, Rachel weeps as she thinks of the immense struggle and pain he endured to protect what he couldn't abandon. She rejects his self-assessment of weakness, declaring him to be strong and kind beyond any words. Time passes as the church exterior stands silent under a vast cloud-filled sky. 1 month later, life at the church continues in the wake of the priest's sudden departure. To prevent public confusion, the official story claims the priest left for the royal capital due to urgent family matters. Rachel asks little Mina what she prayed for while they sit together in the pews. The young girl brightly exclaims that she prayed for the priest's quick return and for chocolate muffins for her snack. Watching the child, Rachel feels that the void left by the priest's absence has not been filled despite their visits to many churches. A maid suddenly interrupts their quiet moment, calling out to her mistress with urgent news. Prince Elliot arrives at the church, prompting Rachel to send Mina away so they can speak privately. The prince prepares to brief Rachel on the official resolution of the messy family and church affair. He explains that the authorities decided to pin the blame solely on the Muto family to avoid church involvement. Elliot admits they suspect Aloy's father acted on someone's orders, but without evidence, this is the only way to settle the matter. Rachel listens with a grim expression, realizing this legal maneuver was designed to minimize damage to the church. Although the church acknowledged the dark spirits, only those who acted openly will be judged to keep the full scandal secret. Elliot notes that since the Holy Church is the national religion, any public backlash from a magic scandal would be overwhelming. The king also wishes to avoid the political fallout that would hit the royal family if the forbidden magic was made public. Rachel concludes that this arrangement leaves the church in a position of significant debt to the royal family. By declaring dark spirits as valuable as light ones, Elliot ensures that Rachel's contract with her spirit will remain secure and beyond criticism. Rachel insists that she did almost nothing and that their gratitude must truly be directed toward the priest's sacrifice. Elliot warns her that while they are safe for now, the mysteries of darkness spirits mean things won't always go so smoothly. He vows to stay vigilant, knowing there are still many people with hidden motives lurking in the shadows. The Crown Prince vows to protect Lady Rachel at all costs, regardless of the time or the circumstances. Trembling with nerves, the prince begs Rachel to listen to a confession he has long held in his heart. Seated across from her in the grand, sunlit hall, he begins the words that will change their relationship forever. With the weight of his feelings finally laid bare, he tells Rachel clearly that he loves her. Stunned into silence, Rachel can hardly process the concept of love coming from the man before her. She gazes at His Highness, her mind racing as she realizes the gravity of his sudden confession. The prince waits for her reaction, his face flushed with the vulnerability of his revealed heart. Rachel reflects on how she had kept her own feelings locked away deep inside, fearing she shouldn't hope for more. Looking at him with tear-filled eyes, she admits to herself that she had secretly hoped his love might be real. Despite promising herself she would never repeat past mistakes, she finds she cannot simply walk away this time. Remembering the encouragement to keep moving forward, she prepares to face the future instead of retreating. Though she is uncertain if she is allowed to return such a powerful feeling, she decides she must respond to his sincerity. Rachel resolves to stop hiding and promises to support him by his side rather than just being protected. Looking across the table, she vows that one day soon she will find her own words to tell him exactly how she feels. Breaking the silence, Rachel announces she has made a firm decision about her future. Inspired by the vibrant people and nature of the territory, she declares that she will no longer run away from her life. She thinks of the local people and the children she has met, realizing they are the motivation for her growth. Determined to give back to the children who carry the future, she realizes she must first continue her own education. Rachel announces her intent to return to the royal capital to attend the academy and study in earnest. The prince offers a warm, supportive smile, relieved and proud of the path she has chosen for herself. Just as he begins to follow up on her declaration, the heavy atmosphere is suddenly broken by an interruption. Theodore bursts into the room with his usual chaotic energy, announcing he has brought the newly appointed priest, Alois. The prince is immediately annoyed by Theodore's suspiciously perfect, shady timing in ruining their private moment. Theodore ignores the prince's frustration and encourages the priest to step forward and greet everyone. A tense silence fills the room as the newcomer prepares to speak. Alois, the priest, apologizes for his return, feeling he doesn't deserve to be back in Rachel's presence. Rachel and the prince quickly defend him, insisting he was only protecting her and that no kidnapping ever occurred. Rachel is moved by the prince's secret arrangements for the priest, while Theodore jokes that it's just a way to work him to death later. The prince snaps at Theodore to stop saying weird, creepy things to Rachel in such a strange voice. Theodore playacts being hurt by the creepy comment, desperately seeking sympathy from a bewildered Rachel. Alois bows deeply to the prince, expressing his profound gratitude for the mercy and help he has received. The prince tells Alois that if his gratitude is sincere, he should simply focus on working hard from now on. Alois pauses, wondering if the prince is truly okay with the current state of affairs regarding the engagement. He points out that even with the church's acknowledgement of the spirits, the engagement is still not fully guaranteed. Alois boldly asks Rachel to contact him immediately if her engagement to the crown prince is ever called off. He suggests they could work together for the children's future, much to the shock of the prince and Theodore. Theodore explodes into a fit of hysterical laughter at the priest's blatant attempt to move in on the prince's fiancée. The prince fumes with jealousy, shouting at Theodore to stop laughing and for the priest to stop hitting on his fiancée. Amidst the shouting and laughter, Rachel smiles to herself, genuinely glad to hear such lively sounds in this place again. She feels a sense of peace, believing the territory will continue to be filled with these warm and happy moments. Theodore later turns his attention to a different matter, calling out to the servant Samuel to join them. Theodore asks about Rachel's supposed fated encounter, but Samuel admits she doesn't seem to remember any such thing. Theodore schemes to use Samuel's skills and foreign connections to get the prince interested in that being. Samuel is shocked and confused when told the crown prince wants to hear about his first encounter with a soybean. Theodore shoves Samuel toward the prince, telling him that everything depends on his ability to spark his highness's interest. Cornered and nervous, Samuel begins a frantic, overly intense explanation of soybeans to a very confused prince. Samuel gets uncomfortably close, preaching about the soybeans' endless potential as the meat of the fields, until the prince tells him to back off. Meanwhile, back at the school, rumors begin to spread among the students about a high-profile return. The students gossip about the Marquis's daughter and the prince's fiancée, Marcel, finally returning from her long leave of absence.